President, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I understand that the state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, city council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearing, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. McDermott, will you please call the roll to take attendance, and members that are in attendance, please indicate so by saying present, whatever you may choose. So ensure that your image is displayed on the screen.
Councilmember Bass.
Good morning, Mr. President, colleagues, and the City of Philadelphia.
Good morning.
Councilmember Brooks.
Good morning, Council President and colleagues.
Good morning.
I am present.
Councilmember Dom.
Good morning, Council President and colleagues in Philadelphia.
Good morning.
Councilmember Gautier.
Good morning, Council President, colleagues in Philadelphia, present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues, and good morning, Philadelphia.
Good morning.
Councilmember Green.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Council staff, and good morning to the City of Philadelphia.
Good morning.
Councilmember Gim.
Good morning, Council President, and good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Heenan. Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Jones. Councilmember O'Neill.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Councilmember O.
Good morning, Council President, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Parker.
Good morning, Mr. President, colleagues in Philadelphia.
Good morning.
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez.
Good morning, Council President and colleagues. I'm present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Squilla.
Good morning, Council President, colleagues, present.
Good morning.
And Councilmember Thomas.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning. Good. Thank you. We've established a quorum of the Committee of the Whole. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 210-320, 210-321, 210-322, 210-323, 210-324, and resolution number 210-336. Mr. McDermott, please read the titles of the bills and resolution.
Bill number 210320, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2022 to 2027 inclusive. Bill number 210321, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal year 2022 capital budget. Bill number 210322, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2022. Bill number 210323, an ordinance amending chapter 192600 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Business Income Receipts and Taxes, by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 210324, an ordinance amending chapter 191500 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Wage and Net Profits Taxes, by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Resolution number 210336, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2022 through 2026 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to the fiscal year 2022, which is to be submitted by the mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this council, approved by the mayor on January 3rd, 1992, by and between the city and the authority.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Today, we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2022, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2022 through fiscal 2027. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded, and because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. So by continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft's team to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must be only used for this particular purpose, and the chat feature shall be only used by members of council. Today, we will hear testimony from the Controller, Sheriff, First Judicial District, District Attorney, and the Public Defender. Mr. McDermott, who do we have up first?
First person to testify is Rebecca Reinhardt, City Controller.
Thank you. Madam Controller, are you connected?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Congratulations for your tough fought victory. Before we start with your nomination,
thank you. Thank you.
Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning, Council President Clark and members of City Council. I am City Controller Rebecca Reinhardt. I'm pleased to provide testimony on the Office of the City Controller's Fiscal Year 22 operating budget. The City Controller is the fiscal watchdog and chief auditor for the City of Philadelphia. To fulfill our mission to make city government work more efficiently and effectively so that it can best serve all residents, my office uses the audit and investigative functions. Under my leadership, the office has audited every department every year, something that has not always been done in the past. We have completed special audits covering a range of issues, from examining problems with the city's new payroll system, One Philly, to ensure employees were paid correctly, to reviewing the Philadelphia Parking Authority's on-street parking expenses to determine if more funds could go to the school district. We have investigated missing guns at the Sheriff's Office and the city's response to the civil unrest last year. Additionally, my office has worked on critical policy issues such as gun violence and the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And my office continues to perform the charter-required monitoring of payments to ensure contractual compliance before payments are issued. For fiscal 22, Mayor Kenny has proposed an operating budget of $9,478,289 for my office. This level of funding makes permanent a fiscal 21 cut of $571,814 that my office agreed to take during the pandemic for 1 year. Like so many other departments, we wanted to do our part to ensure that the city was able to balance its budget while minimizing the impact on residents. On April 5th of this year, my office requested that the cut be restored, but it was not added back to the budget. As such, the mayor's proposed budget, which continues fiscal 21's reduced funding, is insufficient. I am requesting that the Office of the City Controller's $571,814 reduction in Class 100 funding be restored. Approximately 95% of the Office of the City Controller's budget is Class 100, with the remaining 5% in Class 2 to 400. Over the last fiscal year, my office did not fill key vacancies in order to meet the reduction in Class 100 spending. These vacancies, primarily in our audit function, have created a strain in our operations. Continuing to operate at this staffing level will result in a severe impact on my office's ability to perform its duties. I am appealing to City Council to ensure that my office has adequate appropriations to perform the duties of our office as outlined in Section 2304B of the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter, which states, "The amount appropriated to the auditing department shall be adequate to enable the city controller to perform the duties of his office and of the auditing department." As such, I am requesting that my office's budget be restored to $10,140,103 for fiscal 22. I believe we as a government can operate better for all residents. It is a belief I know this body shares, and it is what we all work toward every day. As City Controller, it is my goal that the Controller's Office be seen as a resource, helping to move the city forward and address some of our greatest challenges by providing valuable information, data, and audits. Thank you. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Controller. The issue with respect to the charter and its mandated appropriations, there's not a dollar figure associated with that, but it does clearly state that you, the Controller, must be in a position to adequately perform its duties and responsibilities of oversight, waste and efficiency, all the things associated with your role. Can you talk to me in any level of specificity about, or talk to us about the shortage of funding that you received in the past fiscal and potentially the next fiscal? What would you not be able to do? And what would you be able to do if you got a restoration of the $600,000?
Sure. So the vacancies, so our overall staffing position has gone down from last year's budget testimony when we reported on 135 staff members to 118 in our office. And this reduction is primarily in our audit function. So for 1 year, we managed through, but what it would do if it stays that way is limit our ability to perform the audit function. So, for example, my office has been auditing every department every year, which is something that hadn't always been done in the past. I think that our audit staff would be severely strained to do the audits required without building that staff level up again. So I do think that we need the funds, and I'm all for efficiencies where we can find them, but it does deeply concern me that we wouldn't be able to do the required audit work that my audit staff does in the Class 100 function.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with PICA and the direction as we allegedly wind down on PICA.
Sure.
And
Sure.
and I know it's Controller as having a role in that. A number of us are looking forward to that potential roll down.
Okay.
Give your perspective on the benefits associated with it, and then the possibility of it no longer playing its particular role.
So, great question. PICA is set to go away in fiscal 23. And when it was set up, as you know, when it was set up during when the city was almost bankrupt, at the late 90s, 2000 timeframe, it was always meant to roll off. It was always meant to expire and to give the power back to the city. There are some good features built into that PICA oversight, I think, in my opinion, such as quarterly reporting and 5-year budgeting. Those are best practices. A lot of governments do those best practices, though, without having a state oversight board such as PICA. So I know there's been a debate around if PICA should be re-upped. And, I spoke at a panel on it. I think that we as a city should be able to govern ourselves. But with that said, there's a lot of good things built into PICA that we should just adopt as a city.
Okay.
All right. President, I have a point of information.
Chair recognizes Councilman Green for a point of information.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Controller Reinhardt. We actually have a resolution for hearings on that issue. And then we've been talking with the administration regarding PICA and what steps and what impact that may have on the city as an entity. So definitely look forward to continuing the conversation. I also participate in that panel with Controller Reinhardt and look forward for her conversation, engagement, and all of our engagement in this issue. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Controller.
Thank you.
I'm going to recognize Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. I just first completely agree that budgets that were cut of independent elected offices should be restored to pre-pandemic levels. So I certainly would like to see your office fully restored, as well as the others, so that you can carry on the important functions of your office. I do myself find it alarming that our city has gotten a windfall of $1.4 billion, and we are not doing those type of things. As the controller, what do you think is the role of this $1.4 billion coming to the city of Philadelphia?
That is a great question, Councilmember O. And the $1.4 billion is a huge opportunity for the city. Both obviously it's needed to fill budget shortfalls because of COVID, but it also is an opportunity to make strategic investments. And I know that council will be looking at this as part of the budget process, and my office is looking at this as well in terms of the $1.4 billion and what could be some best practices around utilizing that money. So we will be releasing something in the coming weeks on that, just to be used as a source of information as you deliberate about the budget that you pass.
Thank you. I hope your office is fully funded and then some to keep an eye on this $1.4 billion so we know where it's being spent. Thank you very much, Council President.
I'm sorry, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning, Controller Reinhardt, and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Dunn. I appreciate it.
So I don't know if Rob DeBoe's in the hearing, but I guess I could ask you the question, and if he's here, he could chime in also. But I wanted to talk about the schedule of financial assistance, like really briefly. 8 years ago, I think the federal government changed some of the accounting rules, and now they require the submission of a single audit of how our agencies and organizations spend federal dollars alongside the CAFR. We have yet to successfully, though, complete this audit on time. The audit from fiscal year 19, which was 3 budget cycles and a pandemic ago, still isn't up on our finances website. Do either of you have any plan as to how we can get up to speed on this?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a finding in our single audits for multiple years now, that the finance department is not getting the controller's office the materials to be audited until way past when it needs to be delivered. So we have cited this as a weakness for multiple years and have suggested that finance hire additional staff on that front. To me, I don't fully understand why there's not more urgency from finance on that.
Okay, is Mr. DeBoe on the call today? Maybe you could also answer. I'm not sure he's here now. Okay. Yeah. All right. All right, well, I'll circle back with him, but thank you for that answer. I have a question. I know you talked about the sheriff's office and the firearms that were missing. And have the recommendations been implemented that you put forth? And more importantly, have we found those guns that were missing?
So, Councilman, you're referencing the audit of the missing guns where we found over 200 missing guns in the sheriff's office. It is important to note that this problem we released this investigation in 2020. We did find that this problem was well before Rochelle Bilal took office, and that her people were very cooperative in the investigation. We are going back in this summer to see if the recommendations were implemented, and it's in basically to make sure the recommendations are implemented. In terms of finding all of those, finding the missing guns, I can't answer that with, we gave the information and passed the information, but I don't think we have an answer on that, which is very concerning around the process. I mean, we did find some evidence of some gun sales, and, it's all very concerning. So, I do know, though, that Rochelle Bilal and her team were starting to fix it already. So I am hopeful that when we go back in, that hopefully it will be fixed. And I'm happy to get back to you after that time.
Okay. Another question for you. Thank you for that.
Sure.
I know this is an issue for the city, but what is there a role your office can play in kind of mitigating problems before they occur? And I'm referring to like the One Philly issue that I know you've previously reported on. You have a lot of experience, I know, in this area and in various capacities. Like, what guardrails could we put in place to make sure we're spending taxpayer dollars in a manner that's, responsible, impactful, especially when we undertake these big projects? Like, I know we're looking at the legacy systems we have as a city.
Really good question, and that is I share your concern. The issues with One Philly, some of which have been fixed, but some haven't yet. And at the same time, the city is starting to embark on a project to replace other legacy systems, the accounting system, the procurement system, that will cost over $100. One Philly costs $40 million. They're starting something that'll cost over $100, and I don't have full confidence that at this point that they have a good process in place to do that type of large scale project. And I have called for them to halt the $100 million plus project until they fully sort out all of the problems with One Philly. That they have not done that to date. I do think it might be worthwhile, and maybe there's something we could talk about more around creating some sort of guardrails there, because it is a continuing problem, in my view.
And have you spoken to them about creating that so we could kind of work together and not have issues in the future?
My office has been pretty direct with what we view as the concerns and the issues. So,
okay.
Let
me ask another question. I know you've been the controller now for 4 years, and it looks like it'll be another 4 years of controller. And so what would you say in the area of, there's so many things that the controller's office does, but in the area of saving money for the city, what would you say you've saved the money? So how much money have you really saved to Philadelphia over the last 4 years that we proposed, and how much have they implemented?
Yeah. So a lot of our audits have found opportunities for savings that are not yet implemented, such as even the alternative budget proposal that my office released last year, which said the city could save $40 million a year on overtime management if we just got it down to $6,000 per employee on average across the workforce, instead of $8,000 per employee on average across the workforce as it was a year ago. There are many, many things like that we have identified that have not actually been implemented, and that is one of the things. That's one of, as the controller, I can find the problem, recommend the solution, but I can't force the execution of it. The way I view my role is to constantly be looking for those savings opportunities, those efficiencies, and laying them out to say, we can do this better. This administration hasn't really, I think, done that with the urgency that I think there needs to be.
Okay. Is it possible you can send to us an overview of the recommendations you made? Minute details, just and what we can continue to try to look for to find savings in the budget.
Yeah, Councilman, say it again. You froze for a sec. Ask that question.
Oh, I'm sorry. If we could just get a list from you, Controller Reinhardt, of the implementations that you've suggested and the dollar savings.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. We can put that together.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Councilwoman Bass. How are you?
I'm very well today. Thank you. So a couple of quick questions for you. And one is that I know that you said that your office does audits every year. And can you talk about any audits that you've done in the most recent years regarding the health department and also the medical examiner's office and what you may have found? And obviously, I wanted to talk specifically about the situation where we, lost remains or we thought had cremated remains and then they were sitting on a shelf for the last 35, 37 years. And, these kinds of things really do cause the public to lose faith in government, in us, in all the work that's done. So can you talk about any findings that may have come out of previous audits from those two departments?
Thanks. So it is so horrible and disturbing what the facts that have come out over the last week and a half. It's very, very troublesome. And I think that there are a lot of questions around the medical examiner's office, around why the remains were there, and then the fact that there was a policy to hold some. There's so many different facts that are disturbing that my office is looking at the possibility of doing an investigation there. I do know the administration has announced that they're doing one, but I think that there might be something gained.
Yeah, they're interested in doing one with an outside law firm, and I think it's very important that we look from an internal perspective as well. And so, even though your office is independent,
right,
but funded by the taxpayers, very much who appreciate your findings on these matters and others, I'm sure. So, and I know you and I spoke, just as a matter of transparency, you and I did speak about my request to you that that your office, the Controller's Office, actually oversee a audit of the particularly the medical examiner's office in terms of practices, policies, procedures, what is happening, what is supposed to happen. And it's just mind-boggling. When I first heard about it, it was almost like a gut punch. The idea that someone's remains would be so cavalierly discarded, and then to find out, oh, no, they weren't discarded. Here they are, right here on a box. I just came back from vacation and I found this box that's been sitting here for 37 years. The whole thing just sounds really ridiculous.
It's horrible.
As I said, it leads to a lack of confidence in government and operating systems. So my office is putting together a letter to you, as we spoke about, and formally requesting an audit from your office on the medical examiner's office and what is occurring within their operation. So I'm sure we'll have more conversation about this as your findings become public, but if you could shed any light on anything you may have noticed in past audits around this office or the health department, I think we would all appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Bass, and appreciate that formal request to do an investigation or special audit into the medical examiner's office, so that we will do that.
Yes,
Point of information, Council President.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gauthier.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to state on record that my office will be joining Councilmember Bass in making that formal request of the Controller to examine what happened with the moved remains. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Lady. And what we'll do is we'll circulate it to all members of council who would like to sign on. But thank you, Councilwoman Gauthier, for your leadership on this. We know that this is in your district and you've been at the forefront of this issue. So thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, too.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam Controller.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Fiona Sanchez.
Good morning, Controller. Thank you so very much, and again, congratulations
thank you.
on your service. I also just want to kind of echo that, traditionally in council, the independent elected official should have the ability to have a budget that allows them to function based on the electoral mandate that they have been given as independent elected officials. So I look forward to working with you on that, because I think it's important, and it helps us divide $10 million for, $15 billion in operations when you consider some of our authorities and funds is not a whole lot of money. Given this. So I want to talk to you because one of the important things that you mentioned is the issue of the annual audits and how important that is. And I know Councilmember Dom kind of alluded to this, but I want to kind of drill down on, the specific issues of savings. If you can just, big picture, tell us what are the challenges that you see, right? You have the experience of being on the other side for 10 years around the bureaucracy and aligning, right? And then in the context of COVID, right? What are we doing? What did we learn from COVID around our ability to deliver services and develop those efficiencies so we really are serving the citizens? Anything that you can highlight that you've seen in your experience given the annual audits, which I believe are a good way of refreshing what is going on versus what we're saying.
Right. Thank you, Councilwoman, for that question. There is a lot of opportunity to, as we all know, to improve operations at the city. I think what truly needs to happen is for operations to be looked at from the mayor's office, managing director's office, of each function of government, homeless service delivery, streets, looking at everything and saying, what would be a best in class, how would we get to where we ideally want to go? And then where are we right now? And how do we get there? And that's really looking under every contract, every thing that's been funded forever, to say what is actually moving the needle on the biggest challenges facing our city. Because we all know that we have these big challenges, and there's also community groups that are doing a great job with small funds, and they would do better if they had more, and then there's some funds that are wasted, right? And so I do think that more of a sort of overview of all of that, like to go under the belly of it, needs to happen. But that needs to happen, that's pretty, it's a disruptive process. This disruption, I think, in a positive way, but there would need to be some strong mayoral backing for that, the mayor's office, managing director's office. And then I also think that the overtime issue is a big, big issue that is something that could be tackled. And we've seen in the past, overtime, we can get it down. And it's majority in fire and fire and police, and then streets to a lesser degree. But it's just grown because I don't think it's been managed in the way it should. So that is something that I think could be tackled pretty quickly for a good dollar savings in the tens of millions.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. When you were in your previous role, you know how strongly I felt around procurement reform, right, and the issue of how we contract and how we manage. We sent over a request to PICA, and we'll send a similar request over to you. One of the things that I believe is even more challenging to us, even than overtime, is the cost of doing business, right? How do we compare with other cities for the same delivery of services, particularly in the contract world? Has your office looked at as you're looking at departmental audits, what it costs for them to deliver something basic and how that compares with our peer cities as part of your audit process?
So that would be more of a special audit. The annual departmental audit looks at controls and certain areas, revenue and sick leave abuse and different issues. But you ask a very good question, and that is how efficient is service delivery occurring? and what could we be doing better and differently. And that is something that, for example, the audit of the parking authority touched upon for the parking authority that, you know, there are parking entities across the country that spend much less than ours does for service delivery. And you know, there's various issues around any of it about implementation, but I think that throughout the city there are opportunities like that. And you know, we definitely need to also, the procurement issue is one that we have been discussing internally about the possibility of doing some work around that. More work. I mean, we definitely worked on that years ago, Councilwoman, and it is something that needs a lot of help, especially to grow small business in Philly. So
yeah, so we'll send over an official request and
okay.
We'll send something over to PICA. I really want to look at, particularly in our capital budget, we have an $11 billion capital budget. You know how strongly I felt around in this space, because if we keep talking about supporting Black and brown businesses, but the procurement is still the same 12 companies, the same, you know, right? And this issue of what a responsible bid is something that needs to be better defined. But I'm very concerned about the additional levels of bureaucracy in the capital expense under the guise that we want to be open. But really what we've done is created a situation where even minority bidders don't want to be minority bidders, right? Because it comes with so many different caveats. And again, you know, you and I spent a lot of time in this space, and I think that if we're going to get all these billions of dollars of infrastructure, we're committed to $6 billion at the school district. We have our capital budget. If we don't change fundamentally that structure, who gets those contracts and how that money circulates is not going to change, right? And shame on us if we expect a different result and then we're not able to openly talk about what are some of the structural challenges within those frameworks and bureaucracy. So thank you very much. We'll send something officially as we did with PICA because I really believe that we're out of whack with peer cities around the cost of doing business. Thank you, Controller.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you so much, Council President, and good morning, Madam Controller. Congratulations to you. I just wanted to get one question on the record quickly around some of the work that your office has been engaging in relative to research and providing statistical data around gun violence here in the city of Philadelphia. Could you just talk to us more about that side of your work and how your office is engaging with members of the community around the work in that arena? Thank you so much, and thank you, Council President.
Sure. Good morning, Councilwoman. It's great to see you. Yeah, gun violence is an issue that my office has done a good amount of work on, and this is, you know, obviously it's an issue that, you know, that we all feel strongly about and need to tackle. I mean, it's horrible what's going on here. So my office has done work around this. In 2019, we released an analysis called the economic impact of homicide, of gun violence on our city. And of course, the moral impact, the human impact is by far the greatest impact, of course. But as the city controller, I needed to look at it from a financial lens, and there is a cost to allowing this violence to continue. And I say allowing it to continue because there are programs that have been shown, as you know, to work very successfully in other cities. Other cities are funding their gun violence initiatives at much larger scale amounts than we fund our anti-violence initiatives. And you know, obviously I have a financial background, but I think that this is one of those areas where we shouldn't be saying we don't have the funds for that it needs to be something that we invest in. It's investing in fixing this issue and saving lives and propelling our city forward. So my office has also done a mapping around the gun violence. We have on our website, controller.phila.gov, we have a map that updates daily automatically with every homicide victim, every shooting that occurs in our city, and it's mapped block by block across the city, just to keep heightened awareness on the issue, so that everyone, it's on front of mind of everyone. And I know it's front of mind on you and all of the members of council, but to the public in general, I wanted to do that.
And to your point, Madam Controller, as we prepare to continue down this road regarding budget, if you could give us specific figures around the economic impact of gun violence here in the city of Philadelphia, so that helps us as we look to ensure that we are funding anti-violence initiatives, that would be helpful. Thank you so much, Madam Controller, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I actually had a couple of quick questions, Madam Controller. The Parking Authority, you referenced them on a couple of occasions in terms of audits. To what degree do you have jurisdiction or the ability to audit the red light camera program?
I don't think I do have that authority, because it's my office's authority is, and we did have lawyers look at this, is limited specifically to the on-street parking, and the red light, since the revenue goes to the state and we don't have that jurisdiction, is what I've been told. And I also know, because I wanted to push on it a little bit when we were doing the audit of the parking authority to look at more, and was told in no uncertain terms that I don't have that legal authority, unfortunately.
All right. Well, red light cameras are on the street. Who told you that?
I mean, I believe it was
state prohibition, or is it?
Yeah, it's state law. I mean,
are you a lawyer or what?
I could. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to check back with law and get the opinion, but I do think that was what I heard from a few different places. That I didn't have that authority because of the revenue flow. But yeah, we can look. I'm happy to do more around that area if I have that authority. So I can circle back, have my office circle back with law and get a concrete answer there. Because if there's some ambiguity, I'd be more than happy to talk further about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be an increasing number of red light cameras, and they are generating, decent amount of revenue, and causing people to pause when they get to intersections. But we would like to see where the money flows. It was understandably a state initiative, but I do believe that the portion of the revenue will come to the city of Philadelphia. Not nearly enough, but you can do that. We'll check also.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. There appears to be no additional questions from members of the committee for this witness.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much. And for the record, I am present. Please excuse my voice. Madam Controller, had a rough day yesterday, but I want to follow Member Gilmore's line of questioning about cost of gun violence, but I want to shift it to the many programs, not just grassroots, but many programs that are funded to address it.
Mm-hmm.
Could there be a matrix developed to look at the efficiencies of said programs so that we get a better measurement of what works, what doesn't, pound for pound, penny for penny of the taxpayers' money?
Mm-hmm. So, good morning, Councilman Jones. My office did look at the city's $15 million anti-violence spend in January of 2020, and did release, as part of a data release, a statement that the majority of that anti-violence money was not going to programs that were found to work the best across the country. And those are programs that specifically target those most likely to shoot or be shot. So I think that is something that my office will continue to monitor, and I appreciate that that request, and I think that it is something we could do again to evaluate. But yes, the answer is yes. It's deserving of evaluation. We have done it, and we'll continue to do it.
One of the president often talks about we get paid to make difficult decisions, and one of them is we have all of these programs, and we want to fund them, not just fund them, but fund them to scale. But you need that empirical data that says this is working, this is effective, or conversely, this does not. And that will aid us in making tough choices about who to fund.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Good question. We do need to get that information. I believe now there are no additional questions. Madam Controller, thank you very much for your testimony. Look forward to continuing to work with you on these very, very critical issues. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me this morning. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Our next witness will be the Sheriff of the City of Philadelphia, Ms. Rochelle Bilal. Sheriff, are you connected? Sheriff?
We're checking in.
You good? You connected?
Can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Can you see us also?
Yeah, just state your name for the record, and you can proceed with your testimony.
Okay. Good morning, President Clark and members of council. I am Sheriff Rochelle Bilal. I am pleased to provide testimony on the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office Fiscal Year 2022 operating budget. The Fiscal Year 22 budget general fund request for Philadelphia Sheriff Department is $26,795,874. This past year, we have focused on modernizing our office infrastructure, improving performances in all phases of operation, and overall enhancing our services provided to the city of Philadelphia. Under my leadership, there has been a renewed focus on community outreach and constituent services. The Philadelphia Sheriff Office and its partners have distributed more than 16,000 food to families in the city. With the requested funds for fiscal year 2022, the Philadelphia Sheriff Office plans to increase the number of deputies on the force so that we can better serve the courts and assist the city with law enforcement requests. Our sworn employees are an integral part of every large event that happens in the city, and requests for our presence at the events like concerts, festivals, and other gatherings were rapidly increasing before the pandemic. Support the professional development of all deputies. This goal will accomplish through continuing our training program, which includes tactical training, active shooter training, as well as training for crisis management, crisis intervention, and mental health crisis. Here are just a few examples of what our deputies confront on a regular basis. While serving a warrant on a probation violation, they receive information from Special Victims Unit Philadelphia Police Department that a missing female believed to be part of a trafficking situation was in the basement of the location. They found the missing female, who was deceased. While out serving warrants, deputies heard gunshots and observed a body and a male running away from the scene. They gave chase while also providing information on the male fleeing the scene. They pursued the male, who ran down into the subway with the description provided by the deputies. Philly PD arrested the male and recovered the gun. A deputy was in his home when he heard somebody screaming outside. He went outside, noticed an elderly neighbor yelling. He tried to rob me. He detained that male and held him for Philly PD, and subsequently, the male was arrested. A crucial part of our budget will be devoted to finding a way to bring all training home to Philadelphia, including the 19-week program currently occurring in State College. By having this program occur within the city limits, it would greatly expand the number of prospective applicants, fathers, mothers, guardians, who would be able to come home after a day of training to their families instead of having to stay or live on campus or in a hotel for the rest of the week or drive 3 hours back home on the weekend. And we had that conversation with the state, with PCCD prior to the pandemic. But once the pandemic came on, all of that conversation started. But they are interested in ensuring that the trainings be done here in Philadelphia for our deputies. Increase the effectiveness of our gun lock distribution and weapon recovery program. You may want to look on slides 6 and 7 that we have in our presentation. In these unprecedented times of record gun violence, we plan to ramp up our efforts on both these fronts as we continue to do our part to make Philadelphia safer, including through our continued support of serving protection from abuse orders. If you look at Act 79, that is the duty of the sheriff's office to not only help serve those protection orders, but also confiscate guns for those who are being served with this protection order. Educate property owners on how to prevent sale of their properties when possible. We will be expanding our informational outreach on the foreclosure process and how to avoid it, and to assist previous homeowners in retrieving any excess proceeds from the sale of their properties. And if you would look on slide 12, I think we did more than $24 million from 2012 that went back to homeowners. Complete at these 5 sales, and I know people had questions about that, sheriff sales per month. This would encompass 1 mortgage foreclosure sale and 4 tax sales. Broaden the marketplace and increase the number of participant buyers. By achieving this and making the sheriff sale process fair and accessible to all who want to participate, we make the inroads in the battle to prevent gentrification by ensuring that more individuals have a fair shot at purchasing home, and the increased number of bidders will result in higher price paid, which will return more money to those who have lost their homes in the foreclosure. Continue to improve the system of internal controls with respect to financing and accounting. Rectify all audit expectations left over from the previous administration. Update computer and technology equipment. I am happy to fill in the details if you would like on anything. And the team that I have here today, so that we are clear, they can answer any of these questions. I have Deputy Chief of Operations, Richard Larecchio, Deputy Chief of Policy and Procedures, Mark Carson, Deputy Chief of Training, Angela Brown, Inspector of CJC, Joshua Perez, Inspector of CJC, which is the Juanita Stout Center, Vonda Harrison, Captain of Family Court, William Hines, Captain of Training, Willette Furtick, Captain of Real Estate, Civil Division, Sean Thornton, Captain of Traffic Court, Nicole Nobles, Lieutenant of Internal Affairs, Joanne Smith, Lieutenant of Transportation, Daniel Greenwood, and Lieutenant of Real Estate, William Moore. Also with me is my new Undersheriff, Tariq Shabazz. I also have my CFO, Patrick Lee. Also in here with me is Craig Martin, my budget analyst. Also Director of Real Estate, Daryl Stewart, and Deputy Director of Real Estate, Melissa Simpson. And we welcome any questions you have for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. And good morning to you. Sheriff, just had a couple of quick questions for you. A number of departments throughout the city, particularly those that had interaction with the public, had some high rates of COVID. How did the COVID-19 virus impact your office in terms of individuals being infected? Did you have a high rate of infection among the sheriff's department?
Yes, we did.
Was it as high as, did it impact your ability to carry out the functions? I know the streets department, and one in particular that we all pay attention to when the trash doesn't get picked up.
I live in the city. Yeah, in the city. Yes, it did, but because the courts was down and it was limited courts, we were able to manage to at least secure the courts and different things that we needed to do. But the COVID basically hit us all. It hit us all hard. I still have people in the hospital from COVID.
Wow, this thing is real. I keep trying to remind people that in spite of what the CDC say about taking your mask off, this still is real. It is still here. Sheriff, in respects to limited some of the functions that you traditionally would do, like come to city council on every Thursday, courts were shut down. I'm not sure. I'm assuming that there was no significant level of transport back and forth, which was the sheriff's responsibility. What other duties were you called upon by the city and your department to do as a result of pandemic and other things associated with the city's function?
Because we still did transport to certain places, because we still transport outside the city, and I'll let transportation answer to that. But the city called on us to fit in where we could get in. And so basically our deputy sheriffs were around this city ensuring those food places, the sheriff program food places, distribute food, that they made sure people were safe in those areas. So they worked around the city with all the food distribution events that happened in the city. So they did that. Greenwood, as far as transportation during the pandemic?
Good morning, Lieutenant Greenwood, Transportation Unit of the Sheriff's Office.
Morning.
During the pandemic, we still have to adhere to court orders. We still have we still have to go. So basically, during the pandemic, we travel around the country. The flights were basically shut down. They either stayed the order, waited until the flights basically opened back up, and then we were able to go pick up the officer. But our transportation unit was still working during the pandemic.
Okay. Was there any level of support, Sheriff, on COVID-19 vaccination sites, all the other things associated with what we were doing? Were you all called to assist in that?
Did we do any? No. Nobody called us to sit on the vaccination sites.
Okay, I know that. I saw a number of people in uniforms assisting with the various sites around the city. I didn't know if it was sheriff's office.
I think you might have saw us around the election for the president for the commissioner's office. We basically secured all of their sites when it came down to the presidential election. So we were all around the city and dealing with that also.
Okay, all right. Okay, I was going to ask you. I know you were called into duty because there was a significant shortage around the commissioner's office, city commissioner's office, relating to the election process.
And also the civil unrest. Basically, our sheriff's deputies were out there assisting Philly PD, transportation, because we have the buses. And so our transportation crew was called into all of that. And basically, we kind of like held our own down here in Center City, as far as making sure the buildings and structures here didn't. We were working with Philly PD the whole time on the civil arrest.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Anyone who thinks that you are, because the courts were closed and some other things, more traditional operations were not functioning, that you all didn't have anything to do. I want to make sure that people know that you played alternative roles in making sure that things function properly. I just want to get it on the record.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President and Madam Sheriff. Excuse my voice, it's a little raspy. But I would like to follow the line of questioning that President Clark talked about. And I was keenly aware of what you did during the protest and were called to duty to do transport and things like that. And we thank you for that. What I would want to know is, are your duties and responsibilities similar or different to other sheriffs in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Our duties, thank you, Councilman Jones, appreciate that question. Our duties are similar to all the sheriff departments around. We just are not on patrol. So, but we are somewhat on patrol because we have a bike unit that patrols the Center City area. We have we have K9 that helps patrol these areas. And so our deputies that are at court make sure people that come into the courts and leave from the courts are safe. So we do a lot. We are law enforcement professionals. And for some reason, some people may have thought we were just security guards. No, we are trained the same, and we are law enforcement professionals. You're muted, Councilman Jones.
That happens. I do it all the time. To that end, on that point, when we needed you for the protest, you stepped up. In cases like where there's severe shortages at the prison, to what degree, without violating union contracts, are you able to step up?
No. I said, we do not go into the prisons because we are not violating anybody's contract, and we try to stay in our lane. But if the prisons needed us to assist them, we can, if that comes into play.
To what extent could you, similar to New York, deal with traffic?
Basically, if we are called into play, our people are trained, and more being trained in that area as far as dealing with traffic patterns and how to keep traffic moving, especially dealing down here in Center City. And we can basically step up to that if necessary.
What is the Sheriff's Department's role within dignitary protection, particularly judges?
Was it? Manella? Is he here? No. Okay. That's, you want to maybe look at the slide, I think that's 6 or 7, which basically tells about our warrant unit. Our warrant unit works 24 hours, 7 days a week. And on slide 6 or 7, it tells you everything that we do, dignitary protection for the courts, for yourself, and for any dignitary coming into our preview. We basically work to make sure that they are safe. If you look on slide 6, it says our fugitive warrant unit works 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. The warrant unit travels. They have made numerous weapons and narcotics arrests. We may not hear about the great work that they do, but I do, because they are very impactful and significant in their effort to make the streets safer for the citizens of Philadelphia. As previously noted, we don't hear about the great work of this unit, but we also don't hear about complaints. And so when you hear about our deputies, you may not hear about the great work, but you also don't hear about any complaints. On 7, it tells you, Act 79 came into play where the sheriffs are responsible for serving protection from abuse orders and also confiscating guns. So our orders, protection from abuse order, custody order, warrants, bench warrants, fugitive of other jurisdictions, other jurisdictions, arrest warrants, probation violation, custody, body warrants, governor warrants, child support, delinquent dependency, skyflow. We do it all, basically. So our unit works, then that's our warrant unit. And when I came into office, one of the things that bothered me here is our law professionals was neglected as far as equipment is concerned. Shields, vests. Our vests are 2007, and they only have a 5-year life expectancy on it, and we're walking around with the old equipment, and I couldn't understand that either. So we do a lot.
So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for what you do up at the Police Training Academy, dealing with Scared Straight and the young officers coming into the force. I think it's an important program, and thank you for that. My last question is, how many guns were confiscated due to domestic abuse cases?
Okay. Deputy Chief Angela Brown is in charge of that. She's from training. She'll give you that information.
Thank you.
Good morning, Council. Good morning, Sheriff, constituents, and fellow staff members. For regards to PFAs, my name, by the way, is Deputy Chief Angela Brown. I am assigned to the Training Division. Under training, firearms also falls under my jurisdiction. When it comes to PFAs for 2020 to the present day, we have 185 weapons that have been, 306 weapons that have been confiscated as a result of protection from abuse orders under that Act 79.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Sheriff Bilal, and to members of your team. I want to start my line of questioning, Sheriff, around funds that are held in escrow. I think I heard you say today you gave a number that was $24 million. I think that's what you said that went back to homeowners. And I heard you say publicly before that when a property is sold at sheriff's sale, all money that is left over after all liens are paid is given to the prior owner. Is that accurate, Sheriff?
Good morning, Councilwoman. Thank you for that. And you look on slide 12, it tells you from 2012 to 2021, we have given excess proceeds to return to owner of amount of $24,412,017.66. And our goal is to make sure that after all the liens are paid, that the excess proceeds go to the homeowner.
So again, Sheriff, all money that is left over after all liens are paid is given to the prior owner. And from what I understand, it is true that the prior owner is entitled to those excess funds. I just want to make sure my understanding is accurate. Is that true, Sheriff?
That is correct.
Okay, so I want you to help me here. The homeowner and or the prior owner, do they actually receive any formal notice? So I was under the it's my understanding that the homeowner or the prior owner does not actually receive any sort of notice that these funds are available to them. So essentially, and I want you to correct me on the record if I am wrong, like essentially you only get the money if you know about it and or if you ask for it, that there is no formal requirement of notice that the funds are available. Is that accurate, Sheriff?
Councilwoman, under previous administrations, they didn't notify anyone whether funds were available. Under my constituent service and my HEART program, which used to be called the DART program. And we didn't think that calling it the DART program, meaning Defendant Asset Recovery Team, that we didn't think homeowners were defendants. And so we changed it to HART. So we made it Homeowners Asset Recovery Team. Under my constituent services that started under my administration, it's their job that when we go through this process, that homeowners, because we get a distribution policy. Once that policy comes back, that tells us all the funds or the liens that are need to be paid out and the excess funds that are left over. If there are excess funds left over, the person that is a part of our HART program is to reach out to those family members or the last person listed on that deed to be able to contact them however way they need to, and to let them know that there are excess funds and they can come in. It wasn't done previously, but it is being done now. And if funds were not given back in 2017, those funds have already been escheated to the state. And so therefore, if they contact our office and we don't have those funds, we would tell them that they need to file for a form with the state to be able to get those funds.
So Sheriff, again, because I want to make sure for the benefit of the viewing public across the city that they accurately know, and I want you to just correct me if I'm wrong here. You are stating for the record that it is the standard operating procedure of the Sheriff's Office under your leadership that any homeowner or prior owner, once the liens are paid, that it's your procedure that they are formally notified, and you're saying the program you do this through is through your HART program, but there is a formal requirement that a notice go out to that a homeowner or a prior owner. Is that accurate, Sheriff?
That is accurate.
Okay, and Sheriff, you would state for the record that this is a process that you established. It's not something that happened under prior administration, so no legislation was needed to do this. You established it now that there is a formal requirement that the notice of these funds are available, that's sent.
Well, Councilwoman, I don't know if there was any legislative stuff done prior to me, but I know that there was a DART program which we had in this office from previous administrations that basically gave money back to homeowners, because if you look on 12, it's been done since 2012. And so what we decided to do is that our person that runs our HART unit, that she makes every attempt to contact that previous homeowner once we get the distribution policy back that tells us who gets the excess funds. And if we cannot locate them in a certain period of time, their funds are sheeted to the state. And then if somehow they come up or they find out that there's funds available, then we basically can tell them whether they go to the state or the funds are still being here. And basically we can give them a check from the sheriff's office.
So, Sheriff, you just led me into my next question, because I want to again make sure we get this process on the record. Once a homeowner or a prior owner, the property is sold, all of the liens are paid. You're saying your office has been intentional about letting people know that those funds are available. But how long are these funds made available, and do they go into escrow? So you have them, no prior owner comes to collect the funds. Do you put them in escrow? And if you do put them in escrow, how long is it there?
It goes to the city for a year, and then it's escheated to the state 2 years into perpetuity.
Just tell me that. Come on. Okay, come on. And I'll let Angie answer that, because I want to make sure we have it correct for the record as to the process.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good morning, Deputy Sheriff Angela Brown. In relationship to the question that's being asked by council regarding the HART program, the money as it relates to properties that are sold at sheriff's sale, and as a result, there are excess proceeds that are due to the homeowner. Under the state guidelines, it stays with us for approximately 5 years. At that point, it is then escheated to the state. It stays with the state until perpetuity. It is up to that homeowner to then reach out to the state to then make a request. And if they contact us, we will give them the information, and so that they have the ability to then contact the state to seek whatever proceeds were escheated from our office to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
So, listen, thank you very much for your response in noting that if those funds, if no prior owner after the liens are paid, is contacted, or if they don't respond and get the funds, that the sheriff's office has them held in escrow for 5 years, and after that 5 years is up, that's when they're escheated to the state. So I'm happy we got that on the record. My question, Sheriff Bilal, my final question, Sheriff, is this. Sheriff, my final question is this. If we wanted to make it the standard operating procedure, we wanted to make it a rule of law here in the city of Philadelphia, that if after the liens paid, that a formal notice is sent out to the owner, the prior owner, if they're deceased, their family. Is that something that you could just see? You did it through a program. If we wanted it to be the rule of law in the city of Philadelphia, would that require city council to pass an ordinance establishing such?
I think we need to talk to law and government. Well, on government. If you can pass an ordinance to do that, but I can make it a policy from the sheriff's office, basically stating that after all the liens and we get the distribution policy back, and it says this person is the one that's supposed to get the excess proceeds. And then because we are law enforcement professionals, we would do our due diligence to locate them and notify them that these proceeds are supposed to be going to them. And basically we can do that. Now, if the city council wants to do something legislatively, I welcome that, because that strengthens that. And that's where we can work together on that information. Our policy and legislative policies.
Well, thank you, Sheriff, for your response. And Sheriff, I liken it to when, for example, a mayor issues an executive order about any issue. So it's an executive order while that mayor is the mayor. But if that mayor is no longer the mayor, the next person coming in, they don't necessarily have to follow that executive order, right? Because it was not codified and etched in stone. So I'm going to be in contact with your office, Sheriff, so we can schedule a meeting with the law department to see how we can codify that as a standard operating procedure here in the city of Philadelphia, that by law, the sheriff's office formally notifies the prior owner once the liens are paid of what dollars are available. So I look forward to working with your office to get that done, Sheriff.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and thank you so much, Madam Sheriff. I just had one quick question relative to the work that your office does. You stated with homeowners and others, and I wanted to know, in line with the Probate Deferment Initiative program that was started by our Madam Register of Wills Gordon, does your office work with individuals who have issues with tangled titles and deeds?
Thank you. That's a very good question, Councilwoman. We are working with the Register of Wills because we think that initiative is very important. And so while we are out giving out information about what the sheriff's office does, we also give out that information about tangled titles. So the commissioner at the Register of Wills, Tracy Gordon, we work very closely with her with all of that initiative because we think it's very important, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you. And specifically, my question was relative to any individuals that or homeowners, or if they're living in a property that has a tangled title or deed that's scheduled for sheriff's sale. How do you work with them specifically?
Basically, we would have to find out from them if that is, because I don't know how we would be able to find that out unless the Register of Wills will let us know that this property is in a tangled title. And if so, and it's scheduled for sale, we could talk to the lawyers on the writ, basically to state that this is going through the process of the tangled title process. And most of the lawyers on those writs will basically postpone that. And so therefore they can work that out through registers of will to get that property in order for them to be able to save it.
So we'll follow up with your office and with some of the research that we're having done on that specific issue. But I know that is a major issue happening across the city. My office has heard from a couple of constituents recently, even one faith-based organization relative to that being an issue for them. So we'll follow up with you on that to figure out how we can tighten up any processes internally so that we can help individuals make their way through the process so that they're not impacted potentially by, being included in the sale or any upcoming sale if and when they should resume. But I think we do need a process for that so that we can help folks maintain their generational wealth and legacy. Thank you very much, Madam Sheriff, and thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Madam Sheriff, for being here today. I just want to take a moment to just thank you and your team for assisting me and working with my staff prior to the pandemic to help individuals who were on the verge of losing their homes through mortgage foreclosure. And so I want to thank you and your team for that. But also, most importantly, just publicly acknowledge and thank you and your team for stepping up to the plate as we dealt with a pandemic in which we've never seen. And when our court system shut down, you and your team, y'all pivoted and really got engaged in helping our community, which needed so much help. And so rather it was showing up with your team and distributing food or using your manpower to man different events, I just want to publicly acknowledge and thank you and your team for stepping up and being supportive of the city of Philadelphia during this health pandemic. Just want to get an idea of, one, we know the courts are going to be opening up at some point in time. How has COVID-19 impacted your officers? And then two, the strategy that you're going to be putting in place as we resume addressing our court systems, because we know there's going to be a backlog and so forth, which ultimately has an impact on our system as a whole. But just give us an idea of how you're going to be addressing that.
Deputy.
I think you're on mute. Sheriff, you're on mute at the moment.
The system went down for a second. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay. I wanted to bring Deputy Chief Recchio, who's basically over all the installations as far as the plans that we have discussed. I'm not an island. I work with a whole lot of people here, and I want to make sure they step up to the plate.
Good morning, Councilman and Council members.
Good morning.
Sheriff staff. We've been working with the courts and Sheriff Palau of working out a strategy because the numbers are going to skyrocket. It's going to double. Our transportation for 2019 pre-pandemic was over 65,000. We already know there's a backlog, probably 2 times that. So we figure our transportation is going to go at least 170,000 or more. We have a lot of sentenced prisoners that are down in the prisons that need to be sent to these correctional facilities and also to the state. That being said, which means more transportation, more deputies, longer hours, and we're working, and Sheriff's trying to devise a plan. We've already worked some things out, but still we need manpower, we need vehicles, we got to get things done properly. And like I said, with that being said, Councilperson, the deputies work very long hours, and like I said, CJC is the bulk of the transportation. And as like you said, sorry, Sheriff.
Will you be hiring? Will y'all be hiring more staff and staffing up, and obviously increase in the demand for your office as it relates to the backlog? Obviously, it's going to require more manpower, more equipment. What does that look like in terms of moving forward? And obviously, it's reflected in the budget.
Well, right now, we had, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, we have been budgeted previously for 428, but never given the funds for that amount. And so, yes, we do need to hire more deputies, especially to deal with the overflow that's going to, and it's not going to be done within a couple of years. This backlog is going to go for a minute because they now have to reschedule everybody. So, yes, we do. But we were budgeted for 428, but we never received the funds for at least 428. We're now operating off of how many?
318
How many?
318 deputies.
318 deputies.
All right, just wanted to state for the record, because I look at sheriffs as essential workers, and they're on the front line. They put their lives on the line day in and day out. And because we have such a backlog, and the criminal justice system is such a critical system that we have to utilize in order to make our system move forward. Just that hopefully there's a conversation with the administration with part of the $1.5 billion that's going to be given to the city of Philadelphia to kind of at least figure out a way, because y'all did step up during the pandemic, and there should be a level of support with the relief funds that's coming from the federal government to make sure that our criminal justice system moves efficiently as we begin to ramp up things when it comes to getting back to what the new normal looks like. And so anyway, I could be supportive in that effort. Don't hesitate to let me know, but it should definitely be a conversation with our council president as well as the mayor's office to make sure that there's some support to open up not just the city of Philadelphia from a business standpoint or a school standpoint, but also we also address the issue of our prisons and our correctional facilities, and y'all are a very intricate part of that equation. And so I just wanted to put that out there for the record. Sheriff Bilal and your team, y'all keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman. Somebody needs to mute. All right, there we go.
That wasn't me, Council President.
It sounded like somebody was going underwater, but I was going to call one. Get into some help, right? Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker. I think she has some additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sheriff, I wanted to go back and wanted you to put some numbers on the record for us, Sheriff. Sheriff, when you talked about that $24 million, give us an idea of what percentage of those dollars are getting back to homeowners. Like on an annual basis, since you were there, can you give us a dollar amount and percentages, like on an annual basis?
Okay, I think we sent you over a slide deck. If you go to slide 12, it will show you each year what was given back of excess proceeds to homeowners. And if you, so in 2012 was $1,165,512.72. 2013, $967,994.05.
No, Sheriff, I'm not speaking about before you arrived. I'm talking about under your tenure, Sheriff. Because what I'm trying to get on the record is our improvement. How are we improving and getting money back to us? And so if you could give us those percentages, under your tenure.
Okay. Well, we don't have the percentage, but under my tenure in 2020, $1,486,820.18.
So, Sheriff, when you give that number, you give that number out of how much? That 1 million, that number you gave, so that's that amount out of how much is what I'm asking.
Out of how much excess proceeds?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. That information we're going to have to give to you because I don't want to give you any numbers that are not clear.
Okay, no, and that's
we will give you that out of the proceeds that get sent to the state, or proceeds that are held with us, or that get sent to the state. So we will give you those numbers. We make sure
Thank you, Sheriff, and give them to the president. He'll distribute it to everybody, because what would be very helpful if you say, well, listen, in 2020, we had $10 million that should have gone back to Philadelphia homeowners. We were only successful, in reaching X amount, and that resulted in us being able to give back $2 million out of the $10 million that we had. And then tell us what percentage of that money actually stays in escrow and then eventually goes back to the state. Because what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to market that all of these dollars are being left on the table, and eventually after that 5-year period are going back to the state. So getting those numbers together and getting them to council will be extremely helpful to us from a marketing perspective that we can also get engaged in.
Excellent idea. Thank you for that. We'll make sure you get that information.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Brooks.
Thank you, Council President. I just have a few clarifying questions. The sheriff office is listed as one of your FY2022 goals, making at least 5 sales per month. Can you explain why you selected this goal? Should we be trying to prevent this sales to keep Philadelphians in their homes and not increase them?
Thank you very much, Councilman. So I'll have our Deputy of Real Estate, Melissa Simpson, answer that question for you, because as goals, I think it's already established, but she'll explain that to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman. Good afternoon, City Council, Sheriff, and Sheriff's Office co-staff. So the reason why that is a goal is because we currently hold 5 sheriff sales a month. It's not something that we decided to set up that way. It's just how the cases come in. So we have a mortgage foreclosure sale within which these properties are court-ordered sales from various attorneys related to mortgage foreclosure and court-ordered judgment payments. However, the 4 tax sales that we have all stem from city delinquencies and the city law department. They are cases within which the properties are tax delinquent or delinquent in the water bills, and due to the city not receiving the revenue, they either have contracted out the collection to 2 different attorneys, which is Linebarger, Goggin, Blair, and Sampson, and GRB Law. For those 2 attorneys, they have their own sales because they have an amount of cases that they receive from the city within which they need to collect taxes on. Once again, if they're unable to collect, they go to court, and the court issues a decree for the property to be sold. The city law department then still has their own tax delinquent sale, of which those are also court-ordered decrees to sell those properties due to delinquencies. Then the 4th tax sale that we have is the tax lien Linebarger 6,000 sale, which is tax liens that were sold to U.S. Bank. And because the city sold those liens to U.S. Bank, they therefore are allowed to sell those properties at sheriff's sale to recoup those funds. So those are the 5 sales that have been established. The only way that we'd be able to lower the number of sales we have every month is if the number of cases that are in delinquency are reduced, and the city law department reduces the amount of sales that they have.
Thank you for that. I have 2 more questions, and I'm going to do them together. Your goal also include increasing the number of participants in share sales. Have you taken into consideration how increasing the number of buyers, especially from out of state, will drive up the price of real estate and accelerate gentrification And my next question is, how does your office identify targeted vulnerable homeowners? And what are the criteria to be considered a vulnerable homeowner?
Okay, I'm gonna let Tariq, our new undersheriff, explain that process. But we are putting together a mapping process to be able to identify where all these sales are coming from in the city, so that we can best work with city council in their specific districts on how, to deal with those things. So we got a mapping. Once we get the information from the mortgage foreclosure company, we put that into the map to basically map out where all this is coming from. And when you're dealing with the tax and tax lien sales, we're going to put that in the mapping too. So then we can reach out to the different council people in their respective districts, so that we can work with that avenue of things that are happening, especially in the city. And I'll let Tariq finish up on this.
First of all, good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, members of City Council. What we need to understand is that the process, the Sheriff's Office is the platform and the mode in which the sheriff sales are conducted. We are not the individuals who select which individuals are going to be, or homes are going to be up for sheriff sales and which homes are not. We receive a number of court orders. We schedule the actual sheriff's sale, and then we are notified based upon the homeowners having conversations with the attorneys from the for-tax sales or from the mortgage foreclosure sales, and that could be a number of bank attorneys. Any negotiations that go on, they have that information. So we don't get an address, for example, and that address says that a person lives at this location. The only thing that we do is we conduct the platform. What the sheriff has attempted to do, and we're going to attempt to do this by the mapping process, is to assist city council with members or people or constituents in their district of knowing when these sales are coming up, checking in with those individuals who may be living in a home. We don't have that information. In other words, the mortgage foreclosure sales, the attorneys don't say to us that the person is still living there or the property is being rented, anything of that regard. That actually is information between the attorney that holds the rent, that's the bank attorney, and those individuals that are in that home. But what we do believe, based upon some discussion that we had with members of City Council, the sheriff believed, and then we're designing a way to assist in that regard. So we don't know that information and not required to know that information, because we get these cases at the very end. They go through the process, a court issues the order, and then the court sends that order to us, and our job then is to carry out that service. But it doesn't mean that the sheriff is not looking into a way to assist in that regard. So we don't have that information with respect to that. With respect to gentrification, we do have in process now, that's under review, a pilot program that just was conducted for 1 month. It started to give us empirical data as to where these places are located, whether they're abandoned or they're lots, or maybe people that are inhabiting those particular homes. It's starting to give us that information. Unfortunately, we have a small sample. We only have the sample for April. But it's our hope that in gathering information that we will begin, able to assist City Council in assisting their constituents and knowing who is living in a particular home, whether that home is in fact occupied or not. We have a constituent service division, which actually, if you call up to the sheriff department, we will actually conduct or lead you to those individuals that can assist you in trying to prevent that. And then during the course of the sheriff's food outreach program, we are beginning to attempt to educate the public on what to do to prevent from getting into the sheriff's sale. In other words, before the court order is issued, there are things that can be done. There are services that people can seek out. We believe that more information we give out, the more information we give people on how to prevent it, the more that we have the opportunity of preventing these things from happening. So we may get, for example, 200 and some odd properties for sale. Those sales may be postponed. So we may get 100 of them postponed. We may get another 50 of them that are stayed, and then we end up selling or having the auction, not selling because we don't sell them. We provide the platform, having an auction for the remaining amount. But those stays or those postponements are worked out between the homeowner and the bank in a mortgage sale and the city, because the city for the most part has the other 4 sales, and the people that have tax liens on them.
Thank you for that. Council President, that concludes my question.
You good? Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes, Councilwoman Sanchez.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Sheriff Belisle. I want to reiterate what I said earlier to City Controller Rebecca Reinhardt. I am of the belief that independent elected officials should be provided with the budget they need to do and carry out the mandate of the voters who voted for them. So in that context, you've been in the office here a year. COVID forced you to pivot, and I also want to thank you for all of the work your officers did during the social unrest, and then pivoting to the food sharing situation and distribution throughout the city. Outside of, talked a little bit around the fact that you're never fully funded with your positions. Can you provide an update of where you are as it relates to changing the way you made a decision around sheriff sales to go virtual? What other physical changes do you need to do as a department to better serve folks moving forward that are not currently covered in your budget?
Guys. You can stay right there.
Everybody get their little Patrick Lee, our CFO.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, esteemed council members and ma'am. To answer your question, our goal is to fully automate and move the office into the 21st century. So that will take and require software upgrades. We're in the process of completing our system analysis regarding those things, which are directly related to financial controls and accountability. That is the mandate of the staff in the finance department under the direction of the sheriff to make sure those things are done in concert with the budget requirements that are necessary to support the sheriffs in the field. It's very, very important that we look at that. The staffing requirements as well as equipment upgrades. Those are huge factors in how the sheriffs operate in the field and with the constraints that we have now. In addition, we also see areas with regard to ammunition acquisition. That's increasing because of the demands with regard to the sheriff's deputies that need to take place that involve utilizing a high amount of ammunition as well, with regard, in addition to the training requirements that are so needed, which is dealing with de-escalation, specialized training in those areas. Mental health is another area that we've looked at, and in addition to supporting the Act 79 activities that are necessary to provide safety in and around the residents of the city of Philadelphia.
So in regards, because I agree, I mean, we had this conversation with the police department about what does 21st century public safety look like. As it relates to automation, software, and upgrades, is the city providing you this support through OIT, or are they giving you the ability to bring in, through your Class 200 folks, to help you operationalize the needs?
Well, I'll defer to Bill Swank.
Craig Martin, our budget officer, will answer that.
Craig Martin, budget officer. Good morning. Technically speaking, we do not have a budget that would accommodate the increase for the technical expenses that we have. It needs to be increased tremendously. In some of the cases, we have absorbed the cost of computer training or computer equipment from our own fees that we earn in the sheriff's office. But at this point, due to the amount of improvements that we need. We need that to be offset to the city's budget and the city to increase the amount that they give us.
Just to let you know, Councilwoman, when I took office, we was operating off of Windows 2007.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and that's why I think it's important. And I had this conversation with our DA, as I've had with other folks. Clearly, in my role as chair of appropriations, we can plan for what we have, or we can plan for what we need. Right?
Yes.
And let me strongly encourage you after this first year that you put together a comprehensive plan of how you, over the next few years, can conduct some of these upgrades that are necessary in order for your office to be able to manage more efficiently and more effectively. So I look forward to working with you on that. And then lastly, this issue of the share of sales is going to continue to come up. And one of the things we've learned through some of the great work that's been done around eviction prevention and others is, that sometimes you got to sit all the players around the table and have a conversation, because there are different lanes. And I want to give you a specific challenge that I see as we move forward around sheriff's sale. We asked the city of Philadelphia and the administration why they're initiating tax sales, and we'll continue to have those conversations because we're generating those sales, because we're the ones seeking the court judgment, so we need to have a conversation. But let me strongly encourage you to use this opportunity to put together the courts who issue the sales, because I believe there is a role to be played in terms of getting the courts to help us get the data set so critical around notification. If mortgage companies are coming forward and asking for a sale, they should, as part of this process, let us know, is this owner occupied, so that we can make sure the appropriate connections to housing, counseling, and other things are happening. So let me strongly encourage you to get the courts, the revenue department, sheriff, if you want to invite counsel to participate in that, but definitely some of the people from community legal services and others who do this work. I think this is an opportunity for us to look at this entire process and do it differently. If there are sales that need to move forward, they can. Our goal and council's goal is always about protecting homeowners who have, for whatever reason, whether pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, have put themselves in a financial bind. And I think we've created as many programs as we can to support it. And then there's the rest of the properties that are going to go to sale no matter what we do. But I think there's a way, in addition to your mapping strategy, for us to have a higher level conversation about fixing, clarifying, creating transparency and a dashboard about how this happens, so that we can monitor trends. And I'll end with this. I know South Kensington is a hot spot, and everybody and anybody, we have the folks that are out here aggressively looking to open up, wills and other things, and getting people to sign off on houses. There's literally, and there was an article about 18 months ago around this. You have aggressive folks coming out here pursuing these lots and other things. And I think we have an opportunity through this process to say we're going to do this differently and make sure, and I know the Register of Wills, Tracy Gordon, has been working on this. People need to know that they have equity, right? Even when they find themselves in a bad situation. So putting together a work group about how to best do that through our processes is something that I think council would welcome and would want to support. So I'll end it with that. Thank you, Council President Clark. I look forward to working with you as you bring up your department to 21st century police and public safety. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Council President.
Very much, Councilwoman Sanchez. We're going to make note of that and make sure my staff starts working on that. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Council President, and good morning, Sheriff. I have 2 or 3 quick questions for you. One is, and I asked the controller about these questions. I know that back in November, and I think my colleagues have asked around this question also, did we actually find the missing guns that were reported back in November, and have you implemented the controller's inventory management recommendations?
Thank you, Councilman Don. First of all, when the controller was doing her inventory, we were already in there cleaning up the mess because we saw that. And so right now you have the state-of-the-art area, from security, from tracking, from now everything is tagged and put into a computer system. So yes, it was decades of a mess, and that's what it was. Now, in reference to the 200 guns missing, what we find out is poor record keeping. I'm not saying it's missing. I'm saying it's poor record keeping, because some of the stuff you can't even read. And then you have what we saw, and this is after the controller left, what we went back and kept trying to figure out where these missing things were. Well, we found out that in 1970, 80, and 90s, the sheriff's department allowed deputies to retire with their guns. And so now we got retirees walking around with city equipment. And so some of them have passed away. Some of them we're contacting the pension department to try to figure out where they are. But they're like way back when as to what those, and there was a certain portion of those that was. Then there's a part where some were burned. But because of the poor record keeping, we can't tell whether they were traded or burnt. So we're still dealing with that portion. So we're saying poor record keeping was a part of this, but we don't have that poor record keeping moving forward because we got the state-of-the-art tracking on anything that comes into to sheriff's office.
And shouldn't the guns that were, this first I'm hearing about this, that people who left the department kept their guns, those are owned by the city, I would assume. It's property of the city paid for by taxpayers. Shouldn't all those guns be recalled and brought back to the city?
Well, that's what we're trying to do, because if you're talking about 1970, some of them have already passed away, and we can't even find a member to tell us whether the gun is there or not. And so right now we're going through pension to identify those, and it's about 23 of them. So they're still assigned to them, but we're still going through pension to try to locate where those were, and that's an issue. So yes.
Well, let me ask one last question. I just was thinking about it while I was hearing my colleagues. On the issue of sheriff sales, are you doing sheriff sales around investor-owned properties?
I don't understand that question. Investor-owned properties?
Like a property that's rented out to a tenant owned by an investor. Are those properties being sold through sheriff sales?
That if there's a lien on them that brings it with a court order to sell, that's the way we will go. That's only a court order. We don't know what their property.
I guess my question is, and this council was very supportive of this, and I think Council President, we wanted to increase the sequestration program, where instead of displacing people, we would redirect them to send their rents to the city. And I know the Revenue Commissioner was on board with that, and he was doing it. In those cases, has that not been done?
We don't. Go ahead. We don't know.
The problem is that first of all, good morning, very good question. The problem is that we don't get that information. The only thing that we get is the court order or the writ that this particular property is going on. So the real answer is yes, there probably is properties that people are occupying, that are investment properties that haven't been paid. All of those things exist in those properties that come up. Yes, sir. But we don't have that information. We're not provided with that information, just the court order.
I just think if we could communicate, maybe improve our communications, and instead of people that are paying rent, but the investor's not paying the taxes, we redirect them to pay the rent to the city, the investor's going to pay the taxes pretty quickly. It's a pretty successful program.
No, you know what? That's the law department, the revenue department that deal with those tax lien sales. And so we've been working with Sawala in that area to identify any properties that have people in it. But we don't necessarily get that information. And so if you're dealing with revenue and the law department that has that, then that program should still go on, because then you don't displace people. And we get it. We can probably help in that area.
And to be perfectly transparent, Zawalik, during the course, and I should say Mr. Zawalik, Jim Zawalik, during the course of the April sales, had been very forthright and communicative with us in identifying properties that were actually taken off the list that were investment properties. So we began to have that conversation with people like him. It's a little difficult more when we're talking about mortgage sales and mortgage foreclosures, because it's the bank and there's different attorneys. But with respect to the city, we should have, if we had that communication that Councilwoman Sanchez talks about with the law department, who controls 4 particular fields. And when I say that, the city, we should be able to kind of identify that. So that's something that we can work with City Council, and we can work with the Law Department to try to have a mechanism that we can make identification of those type of situations.
Okay, I'm just bringing it up because I think it's a way more effective way of collecting our taxes by keeping our tenants in place and redirecting their rents to the city. And when a landlord gets that notice, they usually pay up. They've been very successful with that. So thank you, Council President. Thank you, Sheriff. And hope we can move forward on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Any additional questions by members of the committee for this witness? There being none, I want to thank you very much, Sheriff. Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for your service, you and your team. We appreciate what you do for us, and we'll continue to work together on a number of those issues. And there's a couple of things that I think you will be forwarding to us after the hearing, and we'll get that and distribute it among the members. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
We're going to have a slight rearrangement of the scheduled testimony. The district attorney's office has asked to be moved to the last witness, so we'll do first Judicial District, and then the Defenders Association, and then the district attorney's office. So is Mr. Richard McSorley from the first Judicial District. Are you connected?
I am, Council President.
All right, good. Okay, you ready to rock and roll?
I think so.
All right. All right, just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, please.
I'm Richard T. McSorley, the Court Administrator of the First Judicial District. Good day, President Clark and members of City Council. I am pleased to provide testimony in support of the First Judicial District's Fiscal Year 2022 budget. As the District Court Administrator, I represent the Governing Board, or the AGB, and joining me today also is Kevin Cross, the Deputy Court Administrator of Finance. On behalf of the FJD, we respectfully submit for your consideration and approval the FY2022 budget of $115,743,000. The past 14 months have presented a set of unique and in some cases once-in-a-lifetime challenge that continues to test our individual and collective resolve as a city. The financial burden of navigating the pandemic, coupled with the necessary public health and safety protocols that prohibited indoor gatherings, meant the FJD, absent meaningful and forward-thinking solutions, faced the prospect of closing indefinitely. But our courts did remain operational. Electronic filings were accepted and reviewed 24/7, and even as Philadelphians were asked to stay at home, municipal court's preliminary arraignment, emergency protection from abuse, along with our bail acceptance unit and bench warrant court, all remained operational. By April 2020, our judges were back on the bench, hearing thousands of motions for emergency release as concerns about the coronavirus in the jails mounted. To date, over 8 million teleconference and our Zoom minutes have been used to conduct hearings, conferences, and meetings since the start of the pandemic. Since then, with the hard work of our judiciary and our staff, combined with the recent changes to the public health protocols, the courts have been gradually increasing our operability and the number of cases heard, with the goal of being back to pre-pandemic levels of functionality no later than July 6th of this year. After $1.3 million spent with the sole focus of procuring materials and equipment to allow for safe operations and virtual public access, and more than a year of on-the-fly innovations, we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Our focus on combating the spread of COVID-19 did not prevent court leadership from taking on other challenges associated with the pandemic and systemic inequities in our city. After halting residential evictions, which disproportionately impacted the most vulnerable people in our city throughout the duration of the pandemic, municipal court entered an order in April 2021 requiring mediation between landlords and tenants, and in most instances this was before an eviction matter was able to proceed. The move was seen as a game changer by one member of this council and lauded as one of the few programs of its kind in the entire country by journalists and experts alike. Philadelphia's eviction diversion program is one of the most impactful and uplifting outcomes of otherwise a disquieting pandemic year. We are also proud to announce the hiring of a Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, making Philadelphia the first of 67 judicial districts in our Commonwealth to create a position dedicated solely to addressing the diverse needs of our community, our judges, and our staff. We're proud of what we were able to accomplish during this period of such deep uncertainty and angst, and the FJD will emerge from this pandemic as a more modernized and more adaptable court system. As such, we cannot afford to go backwards. As you are aware, the court, like many other government and private entities, was the victim of a cyber attack in 2019. As we continue to work to secure our network infrastructure, a system review determined that our civil case management system is at end of life and must be modernized. This is a multi-year project that will ensure our network is secure and fully accessible to the public and legal community. City commerce, real estate sales, satisfied judgments rely heavily upon this system. If the system is compromised, the impact will be felt throughout the region, but most of all by the city and our residents. Additionally, the pandemic's impact on the state's budget may force the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts to shutter the Common Pleas Case Management System, also known as CPCMS. This system is responsible for all aspects of criminal case management. The system is used not only by the FJD, but by the District Attorney's Office, the Defender Association, the Private Defense Bar, and the prison. Should state funding for CPCMS be eliminated, budgetary resources will be needed to continue this function or to fund an entirely new system at a significant cost that is undeterminable at this time. Lastly, a budgetary shortfall in supervision fees may impact the number of probation officers and the level of supervision the FJD is able to provide. This is in addition to an increased cost that we have now obtained related to our electronic monitoring program, or the EM program, at a time when we are planning to expand EM to offset rising incarceration rates in the prison, caused in part by the pandemic. While we believe our current budget request for 2022 will address this issue in the short term, a long-term solution must be identified and funded. I understand Council has been furnished with a copy of our former testimony, and on behalf of the Philadelphia Judiciary, the Administrative Governing Board, and the employees of the FJD, we respectfully submit to City Council's consideration and approval of our FY2022 General Fund and Grants Revenue Budget. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. McSorley. Thank you so much. And on behalf of Council, I would like to thank the courts for their proactive work with us throughout these very challenging times. Is the diversion programs, the various landlord-tenant mediation initiatives that were entered into as a result of a whole lot of work by a whole lot of good people. I want to thank you all for your role, a role that traditionally is not thought of as it being a part of the courts and the judicial system's role. So I just want to thank you on behalf of council members. You were very, very helpful, more than you know. We just finished, I don't know if you heard any of the testimony from the sheriff.
Yes.
There were a number of questions that came up that were frankly the responsibility or had jurisdiction relating to the court system, and I think the sheriff, and particularly the undersheriff, Shabazz, explained the role of the sheriffs versus the role of the courts, and primarily the issuance of court orders, particularly on the mortgage side, comes from the court. Can you just kind of briefly go through that and tell you what role, and then there were some questions around concerns as a result of mortgage foreclosures and tax foreclosures, but from your perspective, the limitations or the ability for the courts to be involved in some type of program that could be helpful to the citizens who are in jeopardy of losing their homes, particularly, if you can. That's a long question, but I think you get the gist.
Well, basically our role in the mortgage and tax proceedings is a two-part role. The court does take these matters, the petitions are filed, the court rules on these cases, and once that is done, once the court has issued an order, that order goes out to the sheriff's department, and if a sheriff's sale is going to be done, that the sheriff's department schedules those sales and follows through. The court's not notified of the sales. The court doesn't have any jurisdiction over the sales. The court, I know one of the concerns was, as I was listening to the testimony, the properties that might have people in them, none of these factors are known to the court when they make their court order. So once we hand it off, there really is no other involvement from the court unless there are some post-trial motions, and there are lots of different rights that people have to come back into the court. But beyond that, we're not really involved once the sale is finalized.
Point of information, Council President Clark.
Okay. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Quinona Sanchez.
Yeah, I just want clarity. So a mortgage company files for a judgment, and what you're saying is that the judge can issue the judgment without asking for information about whether it's owner occupied and notifications before making their ruling and determination?
Each case is going to be taken on a case-by-case basis, but depending on what the parties bring before the judge is not the investigative body. The parties are the ones who have to bring that information before the judge.
This is basic information. What I'm asking is, can you legally just ask for a couple of data sets as part of your process? Is there any law that prohibits you from getting basic information that has become the biggest challenge with our ability to save people in their homes?
That is definitely a conversation that I believe that the Administrative Judge Sheridan Harris would want to have for the Civil Division, and talk about what role the courts could take in these situations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you actually asked my first question and a point of information, but I'll let you finish your response, Mr. McSorley.
I just wanted to point out that all Philadelphia County Sheriff mortgage foreclosure sales and tax sales were stayed until September 2021 by a court order issued by President Judge Fox. I don't see the date here, but this was just done recently. So we do have a moratorium that has been issued as the 29th day of April.
Okay. Okay. And as I said earlier, my follow-up question to your response was what Councilwoman Quinona Sanchez, but you said that there will be further conversation on that. Because that is, the sheriff essentially said that they have no sense of whether or not it's occupied, vacant. You're now saying in your testimony or your response to our question, you have no sense of that on the court side. And I guess the question is, who knows, because that is a significantly important issue, particularly given the fact that we're trying to put so many different programs in place to save that person from becoming basically homeless. So thank you. And you said that the administrative judge will be responsible.
Administrative Judge Sheridan Harris.
Okay, no follow-up.
She has informed me before this testimony that if there are any issues that she feels that the trial division needs to be aware of, she has a more than willing nature to sit down and have this discussion.
Okay. Guaranteed there will be some level of interest on that particular issue. Thank you. We'll reach out to a follow-up on that.
Clark, can I add something to that, please?
Sure.
My name is Kevin Cross, Deputy Court Administrator. One of the reasons that this order was entered is that there are American relief funds that are out there that many of these homeowners may have access to, and we wanted to put this stay in place so that if they can access these funds, and hopefully then they can save their home during this time while the stay is in place, and come back to the court and say that this has been resolved.
Exactly. Yeah, and we really appreciate that. I mean, there was opportunities similar to what we're going through with the water department. There's going to be a lot of American recovery dollars available for both homeowners, tenants, landlords, ratepayers. So if there's a possibility of alleviating that particular challenge for those individuals, we would like to take advantage of that. You referenced your infrastructure issue. Is there the possibility that the court system, and you know, I know you all had a very significant breach. Do you have a sense that you may qualify if and when the federal Biden-Harris administration's infrastructure initiative gets passed? Because they do talk about broadband and all the other tech-related items in the infrastructure plan. Is anyone from your shop looking to the possibility of eligibility for what you may need over in the court system?
I can answer that question in this manner, in that we have been working with the city's recovery office for just reimbursement of our COVID expenses in two ways. One, making sure that the city gets all of our expenses so that they can submit them and be a part of any rescue dollars that are available to us. And we've already had discussions with the recovery office about pursuing any grant funds that are available to assist in providing additional access for justice. And as this bill becomes law, then we would absolutely be in contact with them about having some infrastructure dollars applied or to our court system, because that is something that we need and something that could offset a substantial expense to us.
I'll just follow up with that. I know we will probably have many conversations with the city OIT department after the intrusion. We have shored up our relationship with city OIT. There's been different intrusions around the city, so I'm sure if these funds became available, this would kind of be a joint venture between the FJDIT and the city OIT to try to go after those monies.
Yeah. I would recommend strongly that you proactively have those conversations with the city OIT in particular, but the city People's Texas in general, because I know there are conversations about establishing our priorities, the city's priorities, with the federal government. So you guys should probably want to start having those conversations proactively. If there's any assistance, we don't want to. Sometime by the time it's announced that the money is available, it's already divided up. And if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Council President.
All right. I had a question, one last question about the pandemic and the virtual hearings, such as we are on today. I know we've had to do a number of those throughout the court systems because of the pandemic. Is there any thought about continuing virtual interaction permanently that is enhance efficiencies, or because of the emergency, is that something that we only would do during that time, or have we found that it might be beneficial? And the other question is, legally, are there certain requirements, particularly as it relates to the criminal side of the justice system, to be able to have in-person interaction as opposed to the emergency authorized virtual interaction?
I believe that this is just another step on the ongoing technology involvement in the criminal justice system and the FJD. I've been around for 35 years. I know I don't look it, but the use of video coming into a courtroom doing post-trial hearings was at one time completely frowned upon, and now it's a preferred method. And now that we've been using Zoom, I think we have discovered that there are different areas of the court throughout the entire FJD where we will probably consider keeping some sort of remote or hybrid kind of technology involved. We have been having those discussions. I think right now what the FJD is looking at is getting everybody back in, getting things up and operational, taking a look at the successes and the failures of our technology and what we can and cannot do. And as you just pointed out, having to have those conversations with our justice partners and in the civil side with the attorneys to see what would be permissible and what will not. I know that preliminary hearings to an extent are being done completely remotely. There has been some challenges with that, though, with witnesses. I have not heard any discussion about allowing a trial to actually be done remotely, but maybe not in my tenure, but maybe the next person's tenure, that will be something that'll just be commonplace. So we have definitely, if there's anything benefited from the pandemic, this is one of those areas. And I know we are going to keep exploring those areas because it's cost effective, it provides better access for the public, it provides more timely hearings. Just having a hearing scheduled in a way that we can stagger them and have people not have to sit in the courtroom all day and wait for their next case to be heard. These are all things that we're looking at and we want to address.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that information. Let me turn over to my colleagues. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you very much, Council President. Mr. McSorley, can you just state your first and last name and your position for the record?
I'm Richard McSorley, and I am the new District Court Administrator for the 1st Judicial District as of November 2nd.
And you are joined by
Kevin Cross, who is the Deputy Court Administrator for the FJD and in charge of the Financial Department.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. Mr. McSorley, can you tell us why Judge Fox, who chairs the 1st Judicial District Administrative Governing Board, isn't presenting your testimony today?
This was a discussion with the AGB, and as I'm the new District Court Administrator, in the past, the District Court Administrator almost always did the testimony. That was interrupted for the last couple of President Judges, and we decided that having me begin this presentation now being the new person, and it probably is going to be an ongoing method that we're going to use. And I'll be here hopefully next year, and hopefully the year after that, and the year after that. I got a 5-year-old, so I need the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that.
Understood. Thank you very much. And I just want to state that for the record, because normally there's an actual judge from First Judicial District giving the presentation. So I just wanted to get clarity on your presence and you giving your testimony today. Can you also tell us why Judge Fox did not accept City Council's public safety hearing invitation last December on racial equity and institutional racism in the courts?
The president judge was invited to that hearing. She was not able to accept or decline the invitation. I don't know personally what the reasons were. I can say that it was offered that I attend the hearing, and I had every intention of attending that hearing. Had prepared an opening statement, and we received your letter, council member, shortly before that hearing, that you were disappointed with President Judge Fox not appearing at the hearing, that you had grave concerns with her not appearing, and then my appearance was a poor substitution for it. So we decided, in order to get our statement in but not offend anybody by my appearance, we just issued my statement, which we'd already had ready, and that's why it was sent over to you right before the hearing.
Thank you very much, Richard. And just wanted to state that for the record. Obviously, when we talk about the issue of institutional and systematic racism within our court system, we see it as a high priority as members of council, but also just being citizens here in the city of Philadelphia. We want to make sure that when we're addressing issues regarding either criminal justice reform or mass incarceration, the institution that pretty much has the most power and when it comes to oversight over individuals who interact with our courts is First Judicial District. And so during that December hearing, it was catalyzed by a report, which I'm sure you're familiar with, called the Center for Urban and Racial Equity Cure Report. And it was commissioned by the First Judicial District following a racism misogynist incident that targeted a black woman judge. For those who are not familiar, the report found that a culture of nepotism, mistrust, and racial tension existed within the First Judicial District. It also found that several white judges and staff believed institutional instructional racism were not significant factors in modern society. Others voiced concerns that reverse racism was as important as discrimination against people of color. And so since that report, can you give us an update on what recommendations have been fully implemented, what recommendations from the Cure report has been partially implemented, and what portions of the Cure report will be implemented in the future? Also, you mentioned that y'all have a new position of diversity and equity and inclusion officer. Give us an idea of who that individual is, their roles, and their responsibility. And then the last part of the question is, y'all have a new complaint system. I want to get an overview of what that complaint system looks like. Have you also appointed a person to oversee the complaint system, and what's the status of it to date?
Okay. Since the Cure report, many steps have been taken by the Administrative Governing Board in order to comply with many of the aspects of the Cure report. But we don't like to think of the Cure report as the reason we are moving forward. As you mentioned, the AGB decommissioned the Cure report. We had an understanding already that there were some internal issues that had to be frankly resolved and looked at, and have hard questions and hard discussions. So the AGB
and just for the record, and just clarify it for me. I know you're saying that there were some internal questions and concerns that had to be addressed after the report was commissioned. The report was released 1 year after the report was actually completed. And so did it take a year to address those issues and concerns prior to the reports being released?
I believe that, and I was not on the AGB at the time, but I believe the AGB was struggling how to perceive the suggestions of the Cure report, how to move forward. Judge Fox did plainly state at a Senate hearing recently that if she could do things over again, she believes that this was a mistake not to release it earlier. But when we had the suggestions of judiciary, of city council itself, the ongoing criminal justice reform and the murder of Mr. Floyd, I believe that the AGB saw that this was something that had to be done, and that's why it was released. And yes, a year later, we did have other issues like the intrusion, but there's no excuse for why that took over a year. I'd like to now, being the person in charge, take that information, take that experience, and move forward and try to implement some of the things that were discussed. So back to your original question, we have already conducted many trainings with our judiciary and our staff. We started out with bias training, but now we are expanding that training to include diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I believe, as you mentioned, the biggest positive, tangible step we have taken was a nationwide search for our new Chief Diversion and Equity and Inclusion Officer. Her name is Chaka White. She will begin her first day with the FJD, has never worked here before, so there's going to be a lot of trying to get used to what Philadelphia is and what the FJD is, but she starts on this Monday. She'll be working here with me in court administration. We hope to not only have her on board, but to create a unit out of this. And again, the goal is not to address F issues and have immediate fixes. And speaking to Ms. White just recently, I had to sit down with her last week, and my concern as being a new court administrator is this is an ongoing process. This is not going to be fixed in a day. This is not going to be fixed in a month. This is a discussion. Things like reverse racism, those are learning points. These are cultural issues. There's a lot of discussion and a lot of change that has to happen. I'm not an expert in this field. I need somebody to help me, guide me along this journey, but I also understand it's going to be a long journey. I've been in this court system for a long time, and I know that the wheels of justice move slowly, but I am hoping that with this new unit, this new officer on board, we'll be able to take these very, very tangible, positive steps, having her guide us down this road, do more training that can be done, and again, in discussions with this new officer, it's not just training. We're going to do videos and put it out for the whole FJD and make everybody sit and watch a 2 or 3 hour video. These are discussions and customized, tailored training. The training for a judge is got to be different than the training for the court officer, who's the first person that the public usually sees when they walk into a courtroom. There has to be that kind of perception. There has to be that kind of discussion. When somebody walks in, they need to know that the person that they're dealing with is somebody who's sensitive to their individual needs, is somebody who's going to help them regardless of what their race, creed, color, anything is. And that kind of work is going to be systematically broken down into different parts. How that's exactly going to happen, I think that's going to start on Monday, and that's when I'm going to be sitting down, and hopefully by this time next year for the budget hearings, I will have a complete report for you, because one of the things I want to be able to do that has not been done is measure our productivity and measure our successes in this area, to be able to show we didn't just have an amount of minutes or amount of times that we put something out there and brought that horse to the water and that horse never drank, that we actually had some successes, we actually had some trainings, we actually had some cultural inspirations that might last forever through the FJD. And maybe I'm being too optimistic about that, but it is something that when I was interviewed for this job, I knew it was an area that definitely had to be addressed.
And so I'll wrap up on this, and Council President, just a little letter to, and thank you, Richard, for being transparent regarding your approach. It has to be intentional, especially when you talk about dismantling institutional racism, because the thought process is the type of thinking that also has a significant impact, particularly on the culture of an institution. And when you talk about, particularly in this case, African-American women, but I've also talked to African-American staff who also have given testimony at the Senate hearing, and how they have experienced a level of bias, institutional racism from the staff level all the way up to the actual level of judges. The only way to reverse it, and we know it's not going to happen overnight, is through being thoughtful and intentional from our policies, and most importantly, the execution and implementation of those policies, specifically targeting the issue of institutional and systematic racism. And so when you talk about your new complaint system that has been put together, just briefly, just give me an overview as I wrap up on my time, and I'll save my next question for the second round, just on how is the complaint system coming along, who monitors the complaint system, and just what's the brief status of that complaint system as to date for individuals who do feel like they have issues from the staff level on up to judges, who may feel intimidated regarding speaking out regarding what's taking place in the First Judicial District.
So, assuming that we're talking about the suggestion box that was just recently implemented in April, there is myself and 4 other staff members of the FJD, a diversified panel. We all have access to see the suggestions that are implemented. There are 2 ways that anybody can submit a suggestion that's completely anonymous. You can submit it and ask for a direct response that is also anonymous. We can write a response directly. It goes to the suggestion box people, and then it goes to that person. We never know who we're responding to. And there are some FJD employees who have given very, very specific suggestions, identified themselves, that we've reached out and had those conversations. One person in particular, about this issue of DEI, wrote a suggestion that prompted the president judge to answer that question, but in a court-wide way, sending out a complete memorandum to everybody saying, hey, this question came in, and this is a question we thought that should be shared with the entire FJD. To date, I believe we have about 180 different suggestions that were entered. I can tell you, as being somebody who's reviewed them, the vast majority of the suggestions that we got were about the residency requirement of the FJD. There's a lot of concern about that, but so far, I believe, to tell you about the process, when we have the panel, we review the questions. If we believe we can directly answer, we come up with an answer. If it's specific to a specific division, family court, traffic court, criminal court, I send it over to the deputy court administrator. I ask them to see the question. I ask them to give me an answer to the question that we can then put out there. What we then realized was that a lot of these questions overlap, and a lot of people didn't want an answer. They just wanted to throw their suggestion in there, and they didn't want to have any kind of reply. So we came up with a frequently asked question box that we have on the internet. And I believe as of right now, we have about 20 or 25 different questions we have on there. We're going to continue to review that. We're going to continue to update that. And hopefully the spots... Go ahead.
Is your panel diverse?
Yes.
You at liberty to say who's on your panel?
I do know who's on the panel. I think that the AGB would prefer to have the employees know that we have management on the panel, and we have court employees on the panel, and we do have diversification.
Okay. Thank you very much. Council President, I'll defer to the next round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and let me just also give a special thanks to our colleague, Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, for his leadership in our body in efforts to, just identify and attempt to ward out through systems and processes, bias, racism, systemic racism within our court system, from the judges on down to the staff. So thank you for your leadership, Council Member Johnson. To Kevin and Richard, let me thank you both for being here on behalf of the First Judicial District. I also want to thank you. I want to start by asking you to give a special thank you to our President, Judge Fox, for her leadership in staying the sheriff's sales until September. She issued the order, you'll remember, on April the 29th. I would argue to you, Richard and Kevin, one of the challenges here in the city of Philadelphia, and I know one that I hold dear, is that I am in no way, shape, or form happy about the fact that the city of Philadelphia is now almost equal as it relates to the amount of home ownership versus those who are renting in our city. And despite all of our challenges, one of the areas that we as a city were always able to boast about particularly among African American households, was that despite the high rate of poverty, we had a high rate of home ownership when compared to cities and municipalities with similar demographics. So that ruling was extremely important as we wait for those much needed ARP dollars to funnel from the state government and get to local government. And so I want to give credit where credit is due to President Judge Fox on the record, and we're thankful for her working in an intergovernmental sort of cooperative planning manner with this council as we use every tool in our toolbox to delay those sheriff sales. With that being said, Richard, I want to go to an area that's extremely important to me, and that's the Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center. And just for the benefit of the listening public, despite its name, this Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center does not simply just serve our seniors. Richard, can you tell me how many people are you on target to serve that have come through the Resource Center for fiscal year 21? And have you been able to provide telephone, email, and or virtual service since people are not currently permitted in City Hall?
Trying to pull up the stats. I anticipated this question and asked the Elder Justice Center to send me their current stats. I think Kevin's going to try to find them. I believe that in 2020 there was a few hundred people that they serviced, and in 2021 I think the last number I saw was about 120 something, but again, we will find those exact numbers for you in just a second. The Elder Justice Center, when City Hall was not allowing people in, did have very, very limited access, so they did expand their use of telephonic and Zoom calls, and they have been performing those calls and those interactions on a daily basis. They have been open.
Got it. Listen, Richard, Richard, do you also have a breakdown sort of demographically and by zip code where those people that you've served, where are they, as well as the type of cases that they are seeking? Because this information becomes extremely valuable to us because it allows us to intentionally target particular areas. So, you know, mortgage foreclosures, deed thefts, ejectments, etc. Do you have that mapped?
I will have to talk to the center itself to see if they have that breakdown. Just real quickly, I found these stats. In 2020, there were 136 appointments scheduled for citizens to meet with attorneys at the center and 119 calls taken during the shutdown. In total for 2020, 255 citizens were served. For 2021 so far, approximately 97 citizens have been served via telephone. 2 citizens were served in person. So the breakdown by zip code and by issue, I will speak to the Deputy Court Administrator of the Office of Judicial Records, and I will see what information, complete information that we can get to you and have that sent over.
No, and again, thank you for that. Again, I don't care if the issue we've dealt with here in council has been the issue of squatting. I don't care if we've dealt with sheriff sales, the mortgage foreclosure diversion program. You know, the right hand knowing what the left hand is doing is always helpful to us in knowing how we should very strategically target resources. So thank you for that, and please provide the GIS mapping to the council president's office for distribution to all members. Now I want you to tell me that what other assistance is provided for unrepresented civil litigants? And let me give you an example. Small claims court, right, part of the municipal court, they provide unrepresented individuals with assistance in filing a complaint. In family court, right, part of common pleas, they have a customer support center. So tell me what other services or assistance is available for unrepresented civil litigants?
And as you mentioned, in municipal court, they not only have that program, but they have a program where they have attorneys on site. During the pandemic, those attorneys have not been physically present, but people have been able to come in They do have assistance for people who are filing small claims cases. We do have, as I said, the landlord-tenant diversion program that's going on right now, where those cases are going through to mediation. In the Court of Common Pleas, we do have availability through the Elder Justice Center for people to come in and get information about civil cases. What I could probably do is get a whole list of any kind of program that we have, including family court. There are many different ways that we do try to help those unrepresented litigants throughout family court, because as we know, especially in municipal court and family court, that is mostly the people that we're serving are the unrepresented litigants. I can get a whole list of those. I believe that was issued previously in last year's testimony, but I can update that and have that sent over to you.
No, that would be extremely helpful. You know, one-stop shop, and then all members of council, we have that information handy and can make sure it is distributed to our constituency. The last thing I want to make sure that I get on the record is very much like we've been working with, my office has played a very active role since we were working on squatting issues and sheriff sales issues with the Bar Association's fraudulent conveyance task force, in helping to come up with solutions, working with a whole bunch of stakeholders as we figure out a way to try to prevent fraud from occurring in our city. I'll be asking the district attorney's office some questions about this. I say that to you to say I am looking forward to working, and I thank you for putting on the record Administrative Judge Sheridan Harris's interest in working on trying to come up with strategies that we can employ that will help Philadelphians remain in their homes as we try to get them access to any assistance available that can allow them to maintain ownership and equity in their and with their properties. And so I want you to know that I look forward to working with her in that effort. And Mr. President, thank you for my time.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Corona Sanchez. Councilwoman Sanchez.
Thank you, Council President. I also want to thank the courts for working with us through a lot of work, and you'll hear a little bit from my colleagues later around eviction and so forth. And I also want to thank Councilmember Johnson for the highlighting around, institutional racism and how we break that down and the importance of it. One of the areas that I believe the court system can ensure around due process is making sure that people have access to courts and their procedures. So with that in mind, given where we are at this point in time, given the civil unrest and everything that's happening, has there been any discussion by the court system around all their fines, fees, court costs, filing fees, and a review in light of the fact that this disproportionately impacts poor people and then poor people of color and their access to due process? Has there been any discussion as part of your review of the court system?
There's been a lot of discussion, Council Member. I have been personally involved in a lot of these discussions. Previously, before I was the district court administrator, I was the deputy court administrator of criminal, so the fines and fees and costs are something I'm very familiar with. As you probably know, one of the biggest challenges we have in this area is that these are state-mandated legislative fees and fines and costs. We don't have the ability to waive many of these, that especially in the criminal division, when a case is disposed of, they're automatically assessed against that case. We have, though, had those discussions with Community Legal Services and the ACLU about what steps we can take. There are some fees that we can address, like supervision fees. And we are talking about that. Recently, we just terminated a contract we had with one of our collection agencies for this very reason. That outside vendor was terminated, and our Office of Court Compliance, who usually works on these collection processes, has taken all those cases back. One of the things the Office of Court Compliance, and one of their stats that I think is pretty impressive, is 80 to 85% of the people that they come up with payment plans with, in order to keep these people from going into any kind of judgment, are doing payment plans of $5 to $25. There's no interest associated on top of that. They try to reach out to these people to keep them in compliance. They try to reach out to these people to see what needs they might have, maybe point them in the right direction. One of the main motivators and collaborations we have is with the welfare department. Many people come to us because their welfare benefits have been interrupted due to fines and fees and costs. The OCC department works with these people to get them back on to the welfare system, to get their benefits reinstated, and to have them uninterrupted. In any way, shape, or form that the court can, when it comes to these kind of issues, we have had the discussions, and we are not in the business of trying to collect money off the backs of the people who can't pay it. We are in the business of trying to get those people's resources so that they can move forward and address these judgments. But it is going to be an ongoing discussion, and I believe it's going to have to be a discussion that moves up to the legislature in Harrisburg when it comes to these mandatory fines, fees, and costs.
So has there, in light of again, we're in unprecedented times, right? So we weren't in this space with a pandemic and, this kind of federal intervention as it relates to states and cities. Has there been a formal request by the court system to the state for waivers in this, in light of the fact that there are so many different procedures and processes for people to access benefits, so that people do not become non-compliant? One financial non-compliant issue triggers another, which triggers another, which triggers another. Has there been a formal request during the emergency declaration for us to revisit this?
I myself am not aware if that conversation has been had. I can say it's the Commonwealth-wide conversation. This might be a Supreme Court conversation with the legislature. I don't believe this can be just the FJD itself, because it's going to impact all the other counties. But that is a question I can take up with the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts and the Court Administrator, Jeff Moulton, for the AOPC. I might be able to have some information about that, or whether those discussions are taking place.
Yeah, since you're new, things won't happen unless we start documenting them, requesting them. We're in a government where many times, and again, we're in local government, we'll say, well, this is a state matter, this is a city matter. No, it matters to us, because when the feds and the state don't act, the city has to. And I think this is one of those spaces when people are seeking pardons, for those of us working on criminal justice reform, people who are being represented by public defenders, that we just keep generating and documenting fees and fines on them. I think is discriminatory. It's a structural problem that we have to fix, and sometimes fixing it means refusing to comply. So I just like us to be a little bit more proactive in that space, because I know that this becomes a detriment to poor people. So, I'm going to encourage and continue to push on that effort. I want to congratulate you on bringing a diversity officer on board. I think that's a huge first step. How are we empowering this individual? Our experience has been that you put this on one person, and then they don't have the authority to measure or hold people accountable. How do you move this forward? So what authority, who is she reporting directly to? And how are we going to make sure that she has the power to make changes? And I know training stuff is long-term. I know all of those things, but it's sort of like, is her first task, let's establish goals, right? But there has to be some sort of matrix. Otherwise, we're going to keep having this conversation every year. And there's no measurable, what are your aspirational goals? Who's going to measure it? And what authority is this staff person going to have?
Well, the new chief is coming with a very large background and wealth of experience. I've been very impressed in my conversations with her. To answer your question, she's going to be reporting to me directly. She's not going to have to report to anybody else. This is going to be an initiative coming out of my, for lack of a better term, new administration. And my intention is to give her the leeway that she needs in order to implement any policies and programs, and do so without worrying about, as you say, having to answer to somebody else, or worried about the policy might not be liked by one faction or another. She's going to be as autonomous as I can have her be. The Administrative Governing Board, in discussing this with her, made it clear to the new chief that she has their full backing. So she's coming in with the court administrator's full backing. She's coming in with the Administrative Governing Board's full backing. And what I'm going to be interested to learn is what you're asking. What are the first steps going to be? How are we going to measure this? What are the impediments that maybe she might see from the very first day on? Just getting her office up and running, because it's going to be here at City Hall, took a little bit of doing and restructuring. So I'm trying to give her all the tools that she needs, the budget that she's going to require, and the growth that she's going to almost certainly need with a FJD staff of 2,400 people.
Thank you. And just, as a closing remark, you made a statement around some of the survey response from staff and the residency issue coming up. This is a trend that we're seeing across the board. This resistance, you want to work for government, but you don't want to live in the city that you work. I find that very, very problematic, right? And something that as you begin to talk about what are the challenges, is concerning to us. We are in public service. We're honored to serve. We serve this government in this city, and when people say we want to work for government, but we don't want to live among those communities, for me, that's a symbol and that we should not overlook. So thank you very much, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez. Here, because Councilwoman, how many more homeowners would we have in the Philadelphia area, right, if everybody who worked here lived here? So thank you for adding that on the record, Councilmember Sanchez. Chair recognizes Councilmember Gim.
Thank you very much, Madam Majority Leader. And good afternoon, Mr. McSorley. I appreciate a number of your opening remarks, particularly around the work and partnership that the courts have been engaged in with City Council and multiple city agencies. But the eviction prevention work has been one of the most successful efforts in the pandemic. We've helped reduce evictions from more than 20,000 in 2019 to less than 5,000, while ensuring that there's been $60 million distributed to help address rent debt and keep landlords whole. I know that the courts have most recently are looking to integrate the eviction diversion and rental assistance programs, in particular with court processes, and certainly appreciate the announcement of the latest extension of the mandatory pre-filing diversion until June 30th. Do you have a sense of how long? I know these are relatively short-term orders, and do you have a sense of what the court plans to do, or whether there's a more long-term kind of analysis that's in place so that people don't kind of have to check every few weeks about whether diversion is being offered or mandated or not?
I know that there are ongoing discussions about this when these court orders come out, especially through the pandemic. Many of the orders, because things change so quickly, as we all know, almost on a daily basis, many of the orders have had a short shelf life, but have always been written in a way that they can be extended and expanded. So I am positive that with this new order coming out of the April 29th order, that before that last date, that there's going to be that conversation with the judicial leadership, with City Council, and as you mentioned, the things that the court is doing, a lot of what we're doing is because of the support of City Council and the information that we've received from City Council. So I am confident that we will have those discussions before any other changes are made. And if changes have to be made, or if things have to be lifted, I am also very confident that there'll be more than adequate notice, and there'll be other resources provided so that people just don't all of a sudden don't have that protection that they had before.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, especially the commitment to the dialogue. We certainly, our office has certainly been deeply appreciative of a number of the leadership within the municipal courts being open to having dialogue and just keeping everybody apprised. We have probably $200 million in rental assistance currently, and we know that we could, at least in the cases of poverty-based evictions, be able to largely avoid that and to help people stay whole, to find other options if need be, and certainly the court's partnership. But if, any amount of clarity, I think we have enough that there could be a move towards a longer term commitment. So clarity around that would be helpful, and we look forward to being in partnership and dialogue with you on that. So thank you. My next set of questions are a little bit about juvenile probation. And, we had an earlier discussion in a lot of the work, obviously, of both the courts and city council are to ensure the public safety, to look out for vulnerable young people right now, and to ensure that those who are under kind of the guidance and care of the courts or other entities are truly the ones who are most in need of it. Recently, there was data shared that we have about 850 young people currently under probation, with about 40 to maybe 50 of them, according to one of the court's chief juvenile probation officers, being identified as high risk. So I wonder if the court has had some discussion about evaluating the effectiveness of juvenile probation, looking at ways to transform probation, and if there's ongoing work, and if our office could connect with somebody around that.
I am certain that there is conversation going on about this. I did watch the testimony of Chief Castro with City Council that was done recently. As you can probably well see and well know, he's very passionate about this area and about providing the services that we need to for the juvenile youth, and especially those that are most at risk. As I indicated earlier, talking about the civil division, my discussions with the Administrative Governing Board, Judge Murphy, the family court, the administrative judge, has also wanted me to extend to City Council that these kind of conversations should be ongoing, that she is willing to sit down with whoever needs to sit down and have these discussions and whatever we can do to address these issues, that her door is open and that this is an ongoing conversation that she's willing to have.
That's very helpful, and I look forward to that. I've been serving for the last 14 months on a statewide juvenile justice task force. Transforming probation has been a repeated area of work, and identifying certain areas of progress that may be needed within Philadelphia in particular would be great. And if you recommend, we would love to get that set up and bring along our Children and Youth Committee as well in that discussion, and probably public safety partners as well. So thank you. And then my last set of questions has to do with some concerns about overcrowding in our prison system. As you know, we have about a 15% increase in the number of individuals who are currently in Philadelphia prisons. There's been a number of discussions about needing to ensure that individuals who've been pre-identified by either the prisons commissioner, the district attorney, and the defenders are able to get their cases expedited, because the situation is actually very urgent. We have as you know, we have a number of vacancies. There's a lot of issues around safety. The deaths in our prisons have been absolutely horrifying, and have been devastating, I'm sure, to everybody, but most importantly to the families whose family members went in there understanding that there may have been just short-term, or who may have been awaiting a hearing, or who may have been recommended for an early release. But the last couple of cases about the murders of a number of individuals have been really upsetting. So what is the current status on review? And Can you speak to the volume of requests that have been made to reduce the prison population and any other processes or policies that the court system has in place that could play a role in reducing the number of incarcerated people to ensure this, to address the situation of safety in our prisons and to ensure that low-risk individuals are released when possible and appropriate?
We have a number of committees and a number of review processes that are ongoing right now. Things like the early bail review process, our prison population committee that meets on a consistent basis and met way before the pandemic to address these issues. The MacArthur Initiative, as you know, was very successful in working with the courts, and the courts working with our justice partners in reducing the prison population overall by about 52%. The one thing that I can tell you that has been stressed at many of our justice partner meetings, and these are weekly meetings that are sometimes 2 or 3 meetings a week with our justice partners. If it's been said once, to be blunt, and it's been said 100 times to the defender, to the district attorney, the court is open and ready to review any case at any time. If there is a petition filed, it will get its full attention right away. We, as the court, can file our own petitions and say, let's take a look at all these different cases, these custody defendants on our own, as we have to remain neutral. But we have stressed over and over again to our justice partners, if you bring us a list, if you bring us individual petitions, if you file early parole petitions, if you file emergency release petitions, if you file bail reductions, they will be within hours usually, if not a day, given a date and put before a judge, and we will have that hearing and we will do what we can in order to release these people. One of the other areas that we've been looking at in anticipation as we move forward out of the pandemic, and because of the we don't want to contribute to the rise in the prison population, is the expansion of electronic monitoring, what other things we can do with our EM system. Right now, that is a funding problem. We did get MacArthur money for it, but that money that we had for it has basically been used and has dried up. So now the FJD has incurred that cost. But even with that, we have a certain amount of EM bracelets, but we are preparing and looking at what we can do, how many more we might need. We want to do whatever we can with the interest of public safety in mind to alleviate the prison population. But I think the reality is that a lot of, and I've been on a lot of these committees and had a lot of these discussions as the former deputy criminal. A lot of the cases that are in the prison right now are very, very complex cases, a lot of violent cases. We, at the beginning, did go after the low-hanging fruit. Who could we get out on emergency release hearings? Who we thought could be released on public safety? Who was being held too long due to the pandemic? We all worked with our justice partners in order to get those people out as timely as possible. Working with the public defender, the kind of cases that can be brought before a judge now for these reasons of early release are becoming a lot harder to find in the court system. But we do dissect the population. We look at it every single day. And again, the fastest way and the best way that we can address this is to have our justice partners file those petitions and bring them before a judge. Because we have the judges on the bench right now. We have the ability to hear any hearing whenever it needs to be heard.
I understand that. Madam Majority Leader, I am done, but I did want to just underscore, we have a 5-alarm situation at the Philadelphia prisons. I understand Mr. McSorley's concern, but the latest individual murdered, Mr. Hinkle, was in on a drug possession charge, put in and was violently murdered by an inmate. The crisis is 5-alarm. There's 6 murders since August of 2020. The staff within the prisons, individuals have a right to know that they will be, that they are certainly, that the people who are there need to be there. But that being said, it is an emergency situation. We need all hands on deck to review what is getting stuck here. The prison population has increased by 15%. From 4,200 to 4,800 individuals, and we are at an all-time low in staffing. So we've got to figure this out, Madam Majority Leader. Those are my majority of questions, but I want to thank the courts. I just ask that we try to commit in a very short term to addressing this urgent situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gim, for your questions. The chair recognizes Councilmember Bass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon.
I have a very specific question based on something that happened in my office that gave me great concern regarding some of the operations in the 1st Judicial District. And let me explain to you what happened. I had a constituent who came before a judge in an attempt to save their property from going to sheriff's sale. The judge gave the homeowner, I believe it was 6 months, to straighten out their affairs and to make a payment arrangement and get everything together so that they did not lose the property. As the after leaving, something went wrong within the 1st Judicial District's computer transmittal system. However the information is transmitted from the courts to the law department in the city of Philadelphia, it didn't happen. There was some sort of miscommunication, miscalculation, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, the bottom line is that the information never made it to where it was supposed to go. And as a result, this homeowner's home was sold out from under them. And, we've been able to be helpful and get it untangled. But I have a great amount of concern that, number one, this was not the only case that this happened to today. And you have a lot of people who may not feel that they can fight the system, so to speak. And so what they would do is they would just walk away. And they would say, well, you know what? I know I was in front of the judge, and the judge said I had 6 months, but the next month they sold my house. And, and it's just gone. And I can't figure out exactly why or how. I'm not an attorney. And, I can't figure out the system of how this could have occurred. But nonetheless, they took my property. And so I'm wondering, what kind of safeguards do you all have in place to avoid something like this from ever happening again? And is this something that you all can go back? I believe that you can. I'm just asking, as a measure of respect, but I do believe that you have the authority and ability to go backwards and say, on that day when our computer system crashed or whatever happened and we lost the transmittals and they never made it across the street, how do we protect those folks whose properties may have been sold as well?
Well, your story is very distressing to me, Council member.
And just imagine if you were the homeowner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, being somebody who been a worker bee in this system for a long time, and I've worked my way up for many years. I've had my hands on in a lot of these situations. The first thing I would like to do is maybe offline is get specific information about this case, because that's what I need to sit down with the right people and examine the date that the order was given. What happened then? Was this perhaps a manual problem? Was something not done that should have been done? I would be happy
to give you that information. Thus far, we've been working with the city's revenue department, the law department. The city solicitor has been most gracious and very helpful in this matter in trying to help unsort it. Of course, Rochelle Bilal and the sheriff's office has been fantastic to work with on this issue as well to help this homeowner save their home. So I would be more than happy to make sure that you're in the loop, have the information, and can try to figure out, number one, how do we make sure this never happens again? But number two, was there anybody else who was caught up in whatever happened that day, that orders weren't transmitted, and then they just decided for whatever reason to sort of walk away?
And that is exactly what the steps would be that I would take to use this case. If we do see there was an IT problem, something did happen, well, then that means we have to go back and look at every single order and every single transfer of information and make sure that everything was done properly. But I think it does begin with specific information to see where the ball got dropped, basically. And I can reach out to your office and get that information and report back to you as quickly as possible. And I guarantee you that this will be addressed right away.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. And we will be, if you can reach out and get in touch with my office, we'll make sure that you have all of the information ASAP.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Or Madam Chairman, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Member Bass. The chair recognizes Council Member Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to congratulate you on your well-earned promotion. You are truly an example of paying your dues, earning your stripes, and making a lifetime commitment to service. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
I've shared enough rooms with you to know some of the questions and the answers I'm about to ask. But for the record, I'd like to get them out there. One of the biggest debates that we have between the courts, the district attorney, the police, is bail. And in so examining the crisis currently in the city of Philadelphia due to gun violence, we are looking at the 100-shooter review, which you are participating in, and I'm thankful for that participation. One thing that keeps coming up is that return offenders who violate with firearms come back and recycle back into not only society, but into situations where they're at crime scenes, a part of people accused of committing that violence. One of the zeroed down issues is bail. Can you please tell us how the bail commissioners are appointed and tell us how they are trained?
The bail commissioners, now called the arraignment court magistrates, are appointed by Board of Judges of the Philadelphia Municipal Court. There's a hiring process. They have to go through that hiring process. There is a training program where you have to be certified. I believe it's either in McAllister or Harrisburg. If you're not an attorney, you have to go through that training process, get certified, register your certification with the Office of Judicial Records in order to even qualify to apply for that position. The last several hires, as far as I know, and I used to work in municipal court, but as you know, I'm not there anymore, I have been attorneys. So this is just like any other hiring of like maybe a hearing master or different positions within the FJD. The Board of Judges review the qualifications of the candidate, and if the candidate meets their qualifications, they get the appointment.
So with that, if gun possessions, shooting incidents are asked $1 less than $1 million, how many times have there been reductions in those bails, allowing people to get on the streets before trial?
That would be a stat that I would have to research, but I can tell you, I had this conversation at one point. We were at another meeting with Mr. Krasner several months ago, and I don't think the question is necessarily what the reduction, whether the bail was reduced or not, or whether the amount asked for was not given. I think the question should be, if the bail was reduced, was the bail able to be posted? If you have the district attorney asking for $999,999 and the arraignment court magistrate sets a bail of $500,000, I believe that's still going to serve the same purpose. If the bail is set at such a low amount and no other action is taken, the district attorney, as you well know, has the ability to file that first motion within 2 hours, with right there in the court. There could be a motion for a higher bail that goes to a Philadelphia Municipal Court judge. If that's not granted, the very next day a bail motion can be filed in the Court of Common Pleas and get in front of a Common Pleas judge. And like any case, the defense is going to have its ability to make their argument, and the prosecution is going to have to make a stronger argument in order to make sure that that bail is raised or lowered or set in the way that they want it to be set. It has to be a neutral authority that makes those decisions. But I've heard a lot of this discussion about what is the amount of bail and whether it's lowered or not. I'm very much more interested in hearing what percentage of people with a bail reduction were able to post that bail and what kind of restrictions possibly were they released on. Because I think that although there are always going to be those cases where somebody does get out, were there for a violent crime and another violent crime occurs, I believe, just from my experience, the vast majority of these people that have these hearings are not returning the way that we think they're returning. But there is concern for those that do get out and do commit more violent acts. And I believe that we just have to take a look at what is going on. And again, this is a conversation with our justice partners. If they don't get what they want, they have to take the proper steps in order to ensure the public safety.
Would you be willing to work with the Public Safety Committee to take a deeper dive into risk assessment and the bail process, both risk assessment and reasons for cash bail?
Oh, as you mentioned, I've been doing that kind of hand in hand with you for quite a while now. The person who took my place, Deputy Court Administrator Darlene Miller, I'm sure will be part of that committee. The conversation of non-cash bail, the risk assessments, the risk tools, these are conversations. I'm sitting in my office right now with Dr. Henderson, who's examined this area, I think, for at least 7 or 8 years. This conversation has been happening. Recently, when the conversation has been had, again, it's the question in my mind right now is the buy-in from our justice partners. What progress can we make with non-cash bail or having some sort of risk tool in place? When that conversation comes up, it's a very difficult conversation. But to answer your question, I've been involved in this conversation for so long, I don't think I can pull myself out of it now if I wanted to.
That's a good answer. And what I'd like to do is not just have the conversation, but come up with some solid suggestions and conclusions. So I look forward to continuing that work. Second part is PFA's protection from abuse. How have we been faring between pre-pandemic and now on PFA's granted?
I think the question is how we've been faring before or during the pandemic?
Both.
The amount of PFAs, of emergency PFAs and PFAs has increased over the pandemic. The Emergency Protection from Abuse Unit that is housed in the Stout Center, I know you're very familiar with, never shut down and in fact expanded its hours for much of the beginning of the pandemic. And the Protection from Abuse Unit and Family Court, I do have those stats available and I can get them to you, but they never shut down. They immediately created a process where people could phone in or email petitions and have a hearing very, very timely and be able to get those petitions. But because of the pandemic, I think it's probably a national trend. We have seen an increase in the EPFAs. We have seen an increase in the PFAs. But those hearings are being scheduled and those hearings are being held and those petitions are being granted.
I would like to look at the number of them that have resulted in gun confiscation. And I'd like to look at the number of violent instances where people disobeyed a PFA and to look at what we can do to strengthen the laws when it comes to people who violate them.
I'm more than willing to get that information to you and have that conversation. I know when a person, from my experience of when they were called bail commissioners working down in the basement, when a person violates it, they are charged with violation of protection order or violation of court order. And it is a statistic that we can pull out of CPCMS and even have it as a monthly chart and see how things have progressed monthly.
So many, and I'll end on this, many victims of domestic violence get the PFA and it is pretty much ignored by their mate or spouse, and many times they have to go back over and over and over again to have themselves in a safer place. So I look forward to working with you, Rich, on that as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think this is a conversation that we would have to include President Judge Dugan and Administrative Judge Murphy and try to get the full picture from beginning to end.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Jones. Colleagues, there being no other comments or questions for the first round, we're going to start the second round, and the chair recognizes Council Member Johnson.
Hey, thank you, Madam Leader. So, Rich, I wanted to go back to questions regarding, again, addressing institutional systematic racism within the First Judicial District. And this question is regarding the establishment of a new system for complaints by particularly judges and staff. And so can you describe how that system works and who oversees it?
Well, if a person is making a complaint about a judge, if they do file it with our Office of Human Resources, it becomes a UJS complaint. Many times when it's concerning a judge, they're a state employee, they're an elected official, our Office of Human Resources will refer that to the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, and the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, and I'm phrasing this in the terms of a complaint being made by an employee, not by an outside person about, a judge's ruling or a judge didn't treat them the way they thought they should be treated in the courtroom, but by an employee that is sometimes investigated by the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts. Sometimes the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts asks our department, depending on the complaint, to do the investigation. And ultimately, as I'm sure you're well aware, if the complaint is severe enough, or maybe doesn't even have to be severe enough, the Judicial Conduct Board is always an outlet for anybody to file any of their complaints concerning a sitting judge. But we do have a process in place, and we do give any complainant the amount of advice and legal advice we can.
So, for instance, the judge comes into his or her chamber, there's a derogatory statement left inside the chamber. How does that complaint get followed up on for an investigation? What's the follow-up? And again, going back to past practices, what's going to be done differently regarding making people feel protected and safe, particularly from the staff level up to the actual judges?
Well, I can cut right to the chase. If we're talking about a statement or a message being left for an individual judge that's of a horrible nature, like was recently done with Judge Simmons.
Simmons, yes.
That is something then that gets taken out of what the process I just talked about. That's not an HR complaint. That's not an AOPC complaint. That was deemed to be a criminal matter. And that criminal matter, when it was determined that day that it was a criminal matter, that was immediately turned over to law enforcement. The Sheriff's Department was immediately involved the same day. The Philadelphia Police Department was immediately involved. A detective was assigned to it. The very next day, an incident report and an investigation was conducted by the Philadelphia police detective. Soon after that, the complaint itself was turned over within a month to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. The FBI started their own independent investigation, and then eventually an investigating grand jury by the Attorney General was formed, and many employees, I think it was about 8 or 9, were subpoenaed and brought down. So for a complaint, if a judge has a complaint, it is that kind of nature. If it's, again, judges do have their own judicial staff. So what I was talking before, if you have a judicial staff and they're having a problem with the judge and there's a complaint there, that might be an HR complaint. If we have a threat or some sort of ugly comment or veiled threat made, as in this case, and it's determined to be a criminal act, that's where the investigation of the FJD would stop and the law enforcement investigation would take over. And we have had, as you're probably well aware, many threats, many notes, Molotov cocktails left on a judge's car. We've had all kinds, especially during the social unrest, of these kind of incidents, and our protocol right now Our written protocol for our judges is to turn them over to the sheriff, and the sheriff immediately involves the Philadelphia Police Department, and then it moves up from there.
And I'll be brief on this last wrap-up question and just ask for a little latitude from Madam Chair, Majority Leader. In terms of hiring and promotion around diversity and percentage of staff and executive positions, percentage of staff who are court officers, and what's your process for promotion, make sure that process is fair, and inclusive? Again, going back to the Cure report, where there were expressed staff regarding nepotism and how people are voted, individuals with less experience than the individual who may be supervising or overseeing them. What are we doing? And some of this came from testimony that was given at the hearing on the state level. What is FJD's strategy in addressing diversity and inclusion and fair promotion and hiring practices moving forward?
What we have started, first of all, the breakdown of this staff. Mr. Cross is getting the breakdown of the makeup of our staff. We started some time ago looking at our hiring, promotional business practices of hiring and promotions. We did hire an outside attorney to take a look at that. He wrote up some legal memorandum. We have, my HR department, myself, several other people are having a review of our hiring and promotional practices. We're trying to come up with a standardized policy, business practice that we can implement within the FJD. The issue of favoritism and nepotism, boldly say that this is not just an FJD issue. This is an issue that permeates.
I received that in your letter, and y'all said, well, the same thing happens in council. But with all due respect, we're not talking about city council or any other body. We're specifically talking about First Judicial District, because we didn't get a Cure report saying this is taking place in city council. We got a Cure report saying this is taking place in First Judicial District. So I'm just asking for the record, what is First Judicial District doing to hire and promote diversity and inclusion and people of color, right? Staff and to executive level.
And as I said, and overviewing and overhauling our hiring and promotional practices. We want it to be a merit-based system. We want I'll give you concrete examples. We would like to have more uniformity in how hiring panels are formed. We want them to be diverse. We want them to be neutral. We don't want one person making the decision that this person is going to get hired over another person. When it comes to having things like letters of support issued for somebody who's applying for a job, sometimes that was just a phone call. I would like you to consider my person. We now want to put that on the record. If a recommendation is going to be made by anybody, it should be in a letter, directed to the panel, directed to the director of HR. It should be completely transparent of what is happening. And these are the kind of steps that we've already talked about, we've already started to implement. And with the new DEI officer, this is, again, another conversation. I'm going to have her input because, as I said, her background, she has a very strong HR background, and I would be interested to hear, it comes from the corporate world. So I'm going to be very interested to hear what kind of practices, when she takes a look at what we're doing and says this is a better way to make it more of a merit-based policy. And if Mr. Cross can give you these breakdown real quick.
Before I even give you a breakdown of our current staff, I just want to point out that we just promoted an African American to our chief probation officer position, and that's almost a 400 employee unit, and that's a key position. We also just promoted recently a African American woman to our to replace Rich's position as deputy court administrator to the criminal trial division. So that's about a 900 person unit, and that's one of our biggest units within the court system. So there are two areas where we have promoted executives from a minority background. Our current breakdown of employees is about 59% white, 33% African American, about 5% Hispanic, 2% Asian, and other. So we are we recognize that we do have some areas to improve on. And interesting enough, in our last 2 months of hiring from January 1st, 2021 to February 12th of 2021, our numbers were reversed in the sense that our African American and minority hiring was at 62%, and our white population or white hiring was at 38%. So that is the beginning of a trend in a different direction, so to speak.
Okay. And I'll wrap up on this. And are the employees that work for the court city employees or state employees?
The employees who work for the FJD are majority city employees. There is roughly 13 employees of upper management, from my position to the deputy court administrators, that are state employees. And you've been.
And how much does the state contribute to FJD's operating budget?
The AOPC contributes about $7.5 million to offset judicial staff expenditures. So there is a direct county court reimbursement that goes directly to the city to offset our salary expenses for our judges' staff. And again, any of those state employees are paid directly by the Commonwealth, so they're not on the city's books.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'll concede the rest of my questions, but thank you very much for your responses.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for your line of questioning. Richard and Kevin, I want to go back to what Councilmember Johnson just asked. Richard, did I understand you correctly when you said the majority of the employees are city employees, despite that small group that you mentioned were directly paid by the state, but the majority are city employees? Did I understand you correctly?
I'll let Mr. Cross answer this.
We were just talking amongst ourselves. I live in the city. I live in your council district, Councilwoman. And Rich McSorley lives in Curtis Jones's council district. I'm going to say a good portion of our deputy court administrators.
Well, I would say all of our deputy court administrators.
Yes.
All of our state employees currently live in the city of Philadelphia.
Okay, currently live in the city. All right. Thank you so very much. The chair recognizes Councilmember Green. I'm sorry, before Councilmember Green comes on, let me ask you this. Is standardized testing a part of any of the first judicial district's hiring practices? Standardized testing, is it required prior to hiring and or promotions in any form?
For some positions, we do have some testing for things like qualified to apply for a probation officer. You have to pass a test first. There are some other HR requirements when you're going to apply for different for different positions. I think for a legal clerk, there's a small test and maybe some typing requirements. I can tell you that these tests and these requirements are, again, something I personally have been here for a long time that I sometimes raise an eyebrows to why we have these kind of requirements, why we have these kind of tests, and that all that is now being reviewed again. I think that a test is helpful in some situations, and I think a test is unnecessary in other situations. But yes, we do have standardized tests.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for putting that on the record. An issue of grave importance to me, especially when we view that many colleges and institutions of higher learning across the nation, even when we get to some of the Ivy Leagues, have decided to totally do away with the SAT and or ACT requirement for admissions because of the bias, included in some of those standardized testing mechanisms. So I'm happy to hear you say that is something you are looking at, because that is something we are looking at as well here in the city of Philadelphia. With that being said, Chair recognizes Councilmember Green.
Thank you, Majority Leader Parker. I apologize if this question may have been asked earlier. I had to step away for a few moments as Councilmember Johnson was asking his questions. And I know he was talking in reference to the Cure report, and I know you're familiar with the work he's been doing on this issue and the hearings that he had last year. And from my recollection, during that hearing process, I think you, Mr. McSorley, were going to participate and attend in the beginning portion that hearing, but then I believe 24 hours before that hearing, submit a letter stating that you would not be able to attend. Can you refresh our recollection regarding your inability to attend that cure?
Member Green, can you adjust your sound? Can you adjust your sound?
Okay, let me try. I've been having problems with my sound on Teams. Does it sound better? Or the
No, we can hear you, Councilmember Green.
Okay.
I did hear the question, council member.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on the work that Councilmember Johnson's been doing regarding the cure report and the hearings he had scheduled for last year. I know he had requested for the President Judge to attend, and she, I think, indicated early on would not be able to, and that you would be testifying in her place. And then from my recollection, about 24 hours prior to hearing, we're not able to participate in the hearing. I just wanted if you could refresh our memory in reference to that challenge in reference to your inability to testify.
It wasn't that I was not able to attend. It was we received a letter from Councilman Johnson on April 1st indicating that he was very disappointed that President Judge Fox could not attend. I was not a member of the AGB at the time in question, and he had grave concerns about my attending in her place. And in discussions on that Monday morning, there was a Monday afternoon hearing, we felt in the AGB that if there were these concerns and issues with me coming to testify, that perhaps what we should do is just issue a statement or some sort of letter. And in fact, I had already prepared an opening statement for the hearing. So he took my opening statement almost verbatim, did a little editing, and made that the statement of the FJD. And that's why I didn't appear that day. I did watch the hearings. I did take notes. I was very much aware of the conversations going on, but that's why that decision was made.
Okay, well, I think that provides some additional clarity regarding that issue, because I think it's important that all three branches of government work collectively together, especially as we're all dealing with the issue of gun violence, which involves all of the branches, from the legislative branch to appropriating dollars, which we do for all departments, as well as independent entities like the First Judicial District, as well as the Mayor's Office and the Police Department, as well as District Attorney's Office, and then the courts, which provides the adjudication of alleged offenses. From the perspective of your Class 200 expenditures, what percentage of those dollars are going to companies or entities? I believe a lot of those dollars go to arbitration fees, from my understanding. I know Councilmember Johnson asked a number of questions, and I heard some movement in reference to the employment in a more diverse perspective going forward. I'm curious from a contracting perspective, what is also occurring in that regard.
Well, thank you for that question, Councilman. I think, as you're aware, we are kind of unique in our procurement process because of our oversight with the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, but we do try to, and we have to abide by some of their policies and procedures. But what related to our contract solicitation and bidding, we do encourage minority, women, and disadvantaged business participation for our contracts. We also encourage potential subcontractors to partner with prime vendors in a particular project. And all of our contracts have affirmative non-discrimination clauses for the vendor and also for the subcontractors also. When it comes to us putting out a bid, or we have a preferred vendor library, and we invite various vendors to apply to be included into this library. And when we do post a bid, we post it on our website. We post it to the city's Office of Economic Opportunity. We post it on various papers of local papers and papers of general circulation, like the Inquirer, Daily News, and the Philadelphia Tribune. Our current minority participation in our contracting is about 31%, and last year it was 43%. We expect it to be around that 43% as the remainder of our expenses for FY21 come in. We track our participation based on our actual expenses and then also against our contract amounts. So we expect to be consistent with our prior year.
Okay. Thank you for that information. It's good to provide clarity and provide some additional context of the work that you're doing, not only on professional services, but also employment within your organization. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Green. This will be the last question if there are no others from our colleagues for this round. And immediately following this, we will begin to hear testimony. Can someone you please? We will begin to hear testimony after Councilmember Johnson concludes his line of questioning. We will immediately proceed with the Defenders Association. Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Last question, Rich. I just want to get an idea of, I'm shifting to a whole different line around gun violence right now, and I know that we're looking at monitoring, ankle bracelet monitoring for folks that's on, I think it's probation and parole. And I just remember the last hearing that I had that you were working on that particular proposal. Just want to get an update on where we're at. Just ankle bracelet monitoring for adults.
One of the, well, first of all, as I mentioned in the opening statement, we, in anticipation for what I believe is going to be what is a trickle, will soon be a flood, we would like to be able to expand our EM abilities. We went from a land-based system to now a wireless system, so that makes it easier. We can install more, they're faster to install. One of the things I personally want to pilot and have been trying to do so, then the pandemic came along, is GPS for adults. That's going to be a little bit trickier than it is for the juvenile system, but it is something that we're looking at. I think right now we have 600 people currently on EM, and I believe that is going to expand. It's probably going to rise. I just hope we're going to be able to meet the challenges. I can tell you from, again, my experiences way back, there was a time when, with our EM bracelets, that you didn't get on an EM bracelet until somebody got off an EM bracelet. And that just went to prison overcrowding and basic unfairness. So I would like to be able to avoid that. I just don't know what to expect, but we have been talking to our vendor, and we are going to be prepared. I know the funding is going to be a general issue about that.
All right, well, thank you, Rich. And that's the area of interest of mine. I think it's a good way to monitor people without, having them have to be in prison. And so any way that we could be supportive from that aspect, chairing the special committee on gun violence, I'm willing to have that conversation and that dialogue with you and your team. And again, also, thank you for just stepping up to the plate and answering the questions regarding the CURE report. And look forward to working with you. Thank you very much, Rich.
I look forward to it too, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for your testimony. And are there any other comments or questions from members of the committee for this witness? Hearing none, we want to thank you, Richard and Cameron, for being here today on behalf of the 1st Judicial District. Colleagues, we immediately wanted to begin with our next department, and instead of it being the Defenders, it will be the District Attorney's Office. However, our stenographer has said we need a 15-minute break, and you don't mess with the stenographer. So we will report back here at 1:45. It is now 1:30. We will resume at 1:45 p.m. with the District Attorney's Office. Thank you all so very much for your patience.